Got my mandolin back from Oregon.
Growing with Fishes podcast. I'm Steve, and we have a great episode for you this week. This week we're going to flip things around. The panelists are going to interview Marty and I. We're going to do Marty first because he's got a little less time than I do tonight, and so we're going to have a good time. So we have Tommy with us today.
Hey everybody, glad to be here.
Also known as Old Fart Grows. We got Mr. Green Jeans. As we'll do next.
Everybody, thanks for inviting me once again. I don't know why you do, but
we got Marty.
Marty.
We got Marty.
Hello.
We got Hogmaster back once again. I guess we got Roger. We got Roger.
Roger, also known as Latewood.
Yep. So I know he's been real busy over at his website doing all kinds of cool stuff. So we'll get to that a little later in the show. So I'll guess we'll turn the show over to the panelists, and then we'll have Marty go first, and then I'll go after.
Well, I think Roger had one he wanted to start with, right? And Tommy over there, you got a list, looks like, man.
I've got stuff to keep notes, and I have one question on the list. If it's all right, I'll start with you. Just by way of introduction, I met Steve a number of years ago at a grow he was at, trying to get back in shape down in San Diego. And one weekend one Thursday he invited me on the show as a guest, and I actually couldn't even believe it. Kind of toured my garden and stuff, and I've been hanging around ever since. And there's a lot of things I've learned about him over the years that I know Steve always does a really great job of interviewing people, and maybe haven't asked him questions. And Marty, brings a lot of stuff up, but we just celebrated the 100th episode. I had my silly Batman mask on, for the party and everything last week. If you missed that one, go back and get that. But I want to ask some questions from kind of my standpoint, because when you look at the growers that are on the panel here, they're all way advanced from where I am. I was a salt farmer, which is something I know the panel's not very excited about. I just did the basic stuff where you just put the chemical nutes on the plant, and I was intrigued by this. And then as I've learned over time what these guys do, they just have been giving information. So we're going to take a couple minutes here and ask some questions. I'm going to start with Marty. So Marty, how long have you been just growing in general? What got you interested in growing, and then what made you consider and then jump ship and actually go to aquaponics?
Well, that's an interesting question. I've been a cannabis consumer for a number of years. I grew up in Northern California, Siskiyou, Humboldt County kind of areas. So it was, I got always around it, like people always growing it, but I never really done it myself until I started doing aquaponics later on. So it's kind of interesting to, kind of make that transition, I guess, from a consumer or just being around it all the time. And when I mean around it all the time, I mean like everybody grew, like especially in Humboldt. It's like everybody, like my little brother lived down there, and I go down and visit him and like all of his friends. Like we go on the tour, like check this out, check that out, and it was always, it's always cool and fun. Everybody had plants around, and it was a good old time. And and so I've been around cannabis in different ways to grow it. I've seen like just tons of different variations, like everything from like octagon rooms and vertical shit, and different kinds of lights like plasma and UV, and like just a big variety of them before I even started growing. So it was it's kind of interesting to make that transition to a grower. So I've been around it for a long time, but I've only been growing for myself for I guess 6 years now. And I started growing aquaponics first as more of sort of like a project, because I'm an IT manager, so I'm like all day long just pounding the keyboard, and everything I make is virtual, so I was at a very busy time, and I wanted to do a project that was like tangible, and something that had nothing to do with computers. And we were watching a TED talk, I think, on rewilding, I think is what the name, like the nature of it was. And aquaponics was like a little footnote in like the side of the speech, and it was all about reconnecting with nature and all this stuff. And aquaponics was just like one of the things they listed on a slide, and they didn't even really talk about it, but like the concept sort of stuck with me. So I Googled it, started checking it out, and so I started growing food, just like lettuce and normal stuff with some goldfish, and that worked really well. So I moved on. I was like, oh, I'll grow some tomatoes. And everybody's like, oh, you can't grow tomatoes. It's not going to do this, and it's not going to fruit. And, okay. And it turned out fine. We got lots of tomatoes, especially cherry tomatoes. Just went crazy. So many cherry tomatoes, we couldn't even keep up. Gave them away, and just a little tiny system. And so when I started being able to do that, what else did I grow? I grew something else. I grew a huge cauliflower. And I thought, oh man, nice elements there, buddy. Yeah. But yeah, so I grew a huge cauliflower, which everybody also was like, oh, there's no way. It just takes up too much calcium, and there's not going to be enough of it. And, well, okay, we'll see how it goes. Went fine. Okay. I mean, just nice, big. There's pictures of it, I think, on some of my earlier videos on my YouTube channel, which is AP Meds. I didn't mention that. AP Meds on YouTube or Patreon, if you want to check those out. But so that's when, like, once I grew the like nice, big, beautiful cauliflower, I was like, okay, well, let's see, and it was really good stuff. Like the tomatoes were like, had tons of flavor, like even more so than homegrown stuff, because I've had a vegetable garden in the soil for as long as I can remember. And so it just had like that extra flavor, and was, stronger and tastier, and felt meatier when you were eating it. It had a different consistency. And so, oh man, that's cool. So we started doing strawberries, because kids love strawberries. We did that. At a raspberry plant, everybody's like, oh, raspberries are not going to work. Well, we got raspberries first year, no problem. So it was always, that same thing. It's like, if you weren't growing lettuce, you were getting discouraged. So by this time, it was almost like, okay, well, I've grown everything else, and I'm spending a bunch of money on cannabis. I might as well, grow it for myself, and stop wasting my money. Other than trips down to Cali when I could pick up the good stuff, I was buying it up here at a dispensary, which was cool because I could have it delivered. I thought, like a pizza, that's pretty awesome, I have to admit. That was the first thing I did when I got my card, was had weed delivered to the door. So anyway, that's when I started growing, and I just snatched up some clones from a buddy, and with some lemon OG, and I spent something like $80, I think, total on my first system. It's like some 2x4s, some storage totes I already had. I think I bought a pump, an airstone, and a timer. So it was like maybe $100. Like everything else was just scraps. And timer ran 15 minutes every hour, and it turned out great. But wasn't like no dual root zone, no nothing, just hydrogen, no supplements. I did have red worms in there, so it was red worms and I want to say like 5 or 6 goldfish. And it's the first grow. It's on my YouTube channel. You can check it out. It really, I enjoyed it. It wasn't like a huge harvest, or wasn't a small one either, I wouldn't say. And nice dense buds, super flavorful. OG is a little lanky, or the lemon OG is a little lanky anyway, so I wouldn't say that it was like subpar in size, but my subsequent grows turned out better as I started adding, like worm tea. I started my own worm bins and stuff like that. So that was, yeah, so that's kind of how it started. And I just decided I would spend a little bit of money and see how it went. It went pretty good. So I built an outdoor system, and started setting that up. And that's when I really started getting heavy into making videos and getting active in the on the YouTube aquaponics groups, because I posted some pictures in there, and of course, tons of people had lots of stuff to say, good and bad. We talked about that. That's kind of and being on those groups is how I met Steve, and we were kind of the only two like answering the same questions all the time, and that was sort of how the podcast started. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at now. I can't grow outdoors here anymore because of regulations, but I do have a grow indoors that I occasionally get to attend to. But yeah, so that's kind of how I got to where I'm at now, where I started. And yeah, and I think that even from that first grow, I could tell that the quality was going to be better than even stuff I had seen growing in the ground for a long time. It just, the taste, it was very pungent. I guess it's more pungent, whether it's a sweet smell or a skunky smell, whatever it is, it always seems to have that extra kick to it. Or tomatoes also, same thing, a little extra kick of flavor seems to be in aquaponics. And I still have a soil garden that I take care of all the time, and we get lots of stuff out of. We have blackberries and raspberries and corn and all kinds of stuff. Corn's one thing I haven't grown yet in aquaponics. That might be kind of interesting. You ever done that, Steve?
I have to bring up something. I'm going to drop a little personal information, and I know about Marty here. I'm a dad. He's a dad. He's got great family going up there. I had the good fortune to go visit them one time, but there's something Marty did that is what sneaky dads all over the world do, and I just want to bring it up here. He mentioned he had all the other experience with some of the vegetables and stuff, but he's gotten his kids to buy into eating vegetables by taking them to the beds and planting a seed and letting the kids buy into that. And he's been able to be a better parent through this, in my humble opinion. I mean, good food, good nutrition, reducing food miles. We all have that stuff, but he's not just about the marijuana, and he's not just about the vegetables, but I've watched him leverage his skill sets to bless his family. And that's pretty cool. I just wanted to give you a shout out on that. If you want to tell a little bit of stuff about the kids and how that goes.
You can check them out. My daughter did a cabbage grow in a smart pot. It's on my YouTube channel, and we uploaded updates for that, and she did that for her school, and that was really fun. So yeah, and both of them the same way. But my son, what he's talking about is my son obviously didn't want to eat his vegetables on numerous occasions, like I'm sure most of the panel, and also agree when they were I think he was 5 or 6 when you guys visited. And so anyway, anything that we grow in the garden, it's like an automatic thing. Like ever since we've been doing it, oh, well, you grew it, you got to eat it. Like you planted the seeds and grew it up. And he loves planting seeds. Like he really likes spreading them out and seeing them pop up and like that whole process. And so it's definitely helped his diet immensely. And it gives you the quality time with them and a chance to teach them anything. Which if any of you guys are parents, you can attest to, it's not as easy to teach stuff to your own kids as it is to anybody else anything. And so that's been a great avenue. I've always tried to find those little pieces of stuff. Oh, you like to plant seeds? Great. Yeah, we'll leverage that, in the same way that, you can, pick one of their video, you don't have to play all their video games with them, but just pick one of them and play it with them and understand it and talk to them about it. And I feel like it really helps. Those one little connection things can make you an infinitely better parent. So I definitely agree with Tommy on that. So thanks for that shout out. And check out that video of Nova's cabbage. She did an awesome job doing videos on that. It was a lot of fun.
So your education background, Marty, is obviously towards hardware. I'm a nerd. Everybody's seen me with my propeller hat kind of stuff. Yeah. And none of that world prepares you for this. Do you find it daunting to attack these things, or what's your attitude? It's just like, hey, what is it? It's like you talked about your aquaponics system. You had $100 into it. If you lost it, you're not going to go crying to the the grave over it. Right. But talk about taking risks and what that's meant. And how it cross populates maybe back into your day job kind of stuff. This thing that you've got going on the side.
Yeah, I did that from the beginning. For me, I really identified because I'm a systems engineer. I built like big cloud systems that have, high availability and failover, and it's all for running medical records so that, it stays online all the time. So your doctor can always have access to the stuff that they need to have access to. So, it's all designed for like minimal downtime and everything like that. So in my very visual systematic brain, because I'm dyslexic and I have much more of a visual memory, I identify sort of more like how the physical drawings of network diagrams look the same as diagrams of water systems. So for me, it was interesting to like put together the U siphon and different things like that, and design a setup that I could manage myself, that hopefully would not leak water everywhere. So I kind of made some parallels, like, okay, well, the water is sort of like the data that I have to make sure if all the data leaks out, you can't run any servers. And in the same way, if all the water leaks out, you can't have any fish and nothing can run. So, making sure that, all the backup things were in place. There's a lot of parallels in system design that I really identified with. And that was sort of the thread that I followed, like when you're researching, or when I'm researching to build a system for something, I have to find out all the things to accommodate for. So, as I'm designing the system, I'm researching other people's stuff and sort of, understanding that the fish need air and oxygenation, you need dissolved oxygen and all that information, soaking it up through the design process and system design process for me was, sort of the thread that tied my two worlds that are very far apart together. So yeah, and in a way, I think I've always been, I guess, kind of like that, more of a systems-minded person, in that, I can memorize diagrams and rewire things, and without really having to. I think I rewired like 200 and some connections in a data center from memory on the first try, and turned it all on. Everything was perfect.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Now, I've had the good fortune of tasting your product. What advice would you have for people who are out there who are, considering making the jump? I've heard from some folks where they're like, oh, it's so expensive to get started and you're going to kill the fish. From somebody else, I heard the sage advice, your first grow is actually your third grow. The first two don't even count. and it's about being forgiving and stuff. Would you address, because you are an expert at this point, but for people like me who've never done it, which is why I keep hanging around here, I'm just so enamored. I've gone and taken the classes and stuff, and I re-audit the classes. I know you've been involved in the classes that have gone through the Ouroboros farms and stuff. But what would you say to folks who are kind of like new to this, just kind of checking it out, when they're trying to compare themselves to somebody with your skill set, your lifelong experience around marijuana, having grown things forever? Can somebody get started in this intricate world of aquaponics? So just what would you say to somebody like that?
I would say, what I would say to a lot of people who are trying to start something new, which is that, you can't be afraid to fail. I think that it's important, what they say about the first two grows not counting, like I can kind of see where they're coming from there. I definitely think that there's an element of that. I think that if you measure your success more in your progress, as opposed to like some sort of parallel to a completely different way of growing, that you'll probably be happier, because it's your first time doing anything. It's like your first time going to basketball practice. You're gonna dribble it off your foot a couple of times. There's things that you may not account for in your original design, and the same was true with me. If you go back and look at that first video I was talking about that I posted on my YouTube, I wouldn't grow like that again, and I haven't, just because I learned stuff from doing it. There's things I do differently, ways that I, but it was all stuff that I learned because I eventually got my hands dirty. So I'm all for watching videos. I love videos and content. I watch tons of it, but I always remember to not get too buried in it before I get my hands dirty, because you'll learn something, and you'll go back to those videos again, and you'll be smarter when you watch the next set. So definitely watch the videos, soak up the content, do all that stuff, study everything, and then go get your hands dirty. That would be my advice. And if you're concerned about killing fish, then get goldfish. That's the best thing to start with.
They flush easy, right?
Yeah, they flush
Yeah.
easy.
Okay.
You know, it's no problem. And they only cost like a quarter. You know, just some of them will probably die because of the poor genetics in the goldfish pool. You know, so don't. You know, I don't sweat it when I killed fish to start with, and I haven't in a long time. So I think that there's you know, there's an element to that. But when I switched, I got some catfish. I switched breed. I killed fish then too, because you know, like I'm sure Steve can explain, there's numerous different environments for fish, and species will be completely different when you from one to the other. You know, so most of my experience up until that point had been goldfish and koi, which are ridiculously easy to take care of, and catfish get really cranky and like to fight. So, you know,
did anybody else have any questions for Marty on the? I know Marty's time's a little limited tonight. I'd love to invite other panelists in to go ahead and grill Marty. He's in the hot seat.
I want to know about genetics, Marty. I want to know, well, you know, not only like what kind of genetics you like in cannabis and why you like it, but also like more specifically what would have been your observations about what does well in aquaponic, you know, or in your, you know, in your aquaponic garden, as because you've also done some dirt growing and stuff like that before that. So
yeah, I have. Probably the best, I would say, like side-by-side comparison that I have growing in soil, indoors, outdoors, aquaponics, is Starfighter OG. And there's a number of different ones that are documented on the YouTube channel. If you guys want to go check those out, they're on there. It's my second outdoor aquaponic grow. In that same year, I ran the same cut in soil, watered with the water from the aquaponic system. So basically, you know, in my opinion, just about the only difference was the you know, the method in which they were grown. And so there's a number of different things that I think I can draw from that. Obviously, it's anecdotal. I always say that because I've only done it one time, and it was just that 1 year. But again, I felt like the aquaponic cannabis tasted better. Oh, it was dual root zone too, by the way, dual root zone aquaponics. So, which I feel like is the comparison that we're trying to draw most of the time now. The year before that, I ran some other strains that we can talk about in a second. But for Starfighter, I've also ran indoors and dual root zone. So you can check that out on the channel as well. I think that was my third or fourth indoor grow.
Starfighter is what are the parents of that again? Isn't that
was going to be a test?
No, it's all right. It's all right. No,
I don't remember.
No, it's cool. It's cool.
Google it though, real quick.
I thought I was going to come up with it. Sorry, I might.
Oh, that's all right. I'm going to Google it while I talk. So I do think that that I can say the same thing that I said before, which is just that it smelled the same but stronger. So Starfighter, for you guys that haven't had the chance to try it, it's a real sort of sweet, funky smell to it. Like it's definitely not skunk, but it's like a sweet skunk. So that's what it's like. Cool. There's even a hint of fruit in there. And so anyway, it's from Alien Genetics, is the Starfighter. It's loading.
Anyway, yeah, that's cool. I was also thinking, I was going to ask you, is that a particularly, would you consider that to be a tough plant, like a tough clone, kind of a, you know, because famously the old, one of these old Jack Carrere clones that was going around, and I think it's one of the ones that I still have, you know, is just everybody that grew it, it was very recognizable. You know, no one could really screw it up. You know, it was a very, what you would say was so tough that its sort of genetics came through in everybody's garden and everybody's methods. You know, and it was amazing. I mean, the buds even looked really similar to grown by different people. And it's true because the plant's, you know, that tough, whereas maybe a plant that's more needy, it's kind of easier to impose your growing methods upon it and things like that. So I think there's kind of variation. What would you think about that? About the one that you're talking about?
I found it to be very flexible, and I found that the same cut was pretty consistent, but did show different characteristics in different media. So it was interesting because the dual root zone seemed almost like a heavier stalk and springier, but and when I mean heavy, not like big around, because the plant in the ground. And so just to be clear, when I say ground, I have 1 foot tall beds that are, what are they? I think they are 8 foot by 40. So that's what my beds are. So just a very, 12 inches deep, but right below it, they can grow right down through it and into the soil. So anyway, it was bigger around, but I felt like the stalk in the aquaponic plant was heavier in that it seemed denser and springier. And so even though I would say that like the size of the buds, like the overall, not like the end of the cola, but like the length of it was larger in soil. So let's say the cola would be this long on the aquaponic plant, it would be, say, this long in the soil. So it grew longer and more nodes and overall larger plants in the beds, in the soil beds. But in terms of flavor, quality, I didn't get anything tested, so I can't really say anything to like differences in that. But I did my own quality assurance.
Sure, yeah.
And that, the aquaponic stuff is the stuff I preferred and kept. And of all the people that I shared with, which was numerous, it was exactly the same. So that was probably like the best, same cut, same thing. Other than that, I'm changing too much stuff all the time. Like I'm always swapping out strains or lights or, something, but I've grown that Starfighter under LED and HID and outdoors. And it is, I will say that it's very durable. To your question, I think that it's very flexible to its grow environment, and it seems to adapt a little bit. When I grew it inside under LED, for instance, it turned this kind of purpley color, the purple highlights in the bud, and you can check it out again on the video on the indoor one. Even when I brought it out from underneath the LED and you look at it, you can see some different highlights in it, which are pretty cool.
That's awesome. Great.
Does anybody else have a question for Marty on the panel? Thank you, Mr. Jeans.
We had it prearranged to have. Oh yes, thank you, Mr. Green Juice, for that great genetics question about that strain Marty's been loving. That's pretty neat about you saying it was springy. That's interesting. I could envision what you mean. Like
I feel like the stems, really store a lot of what I was thinking of when he was talking about that. How the stems store so much nutrients, preparing to grow the buds, and I think I've noticed that too. That plants that have certain qualities in the stems, big sizes, they often are able to blast out huge buds like really fast, and you're like, wow, where did that come from?
Right. I will say too that the aquaponic Starfighter OG finished like 3 to 5 days earlier than what I felt like the soil plants did. And I do feel like part of the reason why they were springing also is I was feeding horsetail fern tea as a part of my normal regimen, so keeping that silica up. Steve, it's always been
all that stuff together sounds kind of like just lower stress. It kind of sounds to me like everything sounds to me like the aquaponic system was lower stress. Like the plant's all happy, mellow.
I mean, assuming you have a healthy system, right? Because
Yeah.
I'm sure Steve can probably tell you some horror stories about some unfriendly aquaponic environments.
Yeah.
But yeah, as long as you have a healthy system, it should be a very low stress. And I feel like forgiving way to grow. I know it gets a rap of not being forgiving, but I think as long as you can learn to keep that environment relatively stable, and understand how it gets to that point, then I feel like as far as like your flexibility with nutrients, it is relatively easy in terms of maintenance. Like it's not easy in terms of understanding it, but once you get it, then I feel like maintenance can be a lot less than what a lot of people envision it to be. And
learn from your plants. You learn from your plants as you do it.
Right. Which, is, you hear that a lot with hydro growers too, because I think part of it, back to what you're talking about with the pressure, I think is the consistent access to water. I feel like the plants benefit from that, or it is part of that, environmental change, that when they have constant access to water. And the reason that I say that is because my first grow, they didn't have constant access. It would water 15 minutes every hour and then drain completely dry. And I didn't feel like, I felt like once I transitioned to a siphon system that would run consistently and they would always have access to it, I always had more vigorous growth, bigger flowers, better flavor, all that stuff. Just as much, probably more noticeable in the transition to siphon system than it was to dual root zone, but along that same similar sort of scale. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay. All right, so back to aquaponics, which you mentioned. I wanted to touch before I got to the original question we discussed off air. I wanted to. You brought up red worms, how you used red worms, and why don't you explain the benefit of that and why do you use red worms? And because a lot of people are going, what? I'm going to build a bed and then I'm going to put worms in it. I'm assuming you're putting the red worms in your hydroton, right?
Yeah, I put them in the hydroton. I mean, they're going to end up everywhere anyway. You'll probably have some end up in the tank and the fish will eat them. They'll be in your filter if you have a filter. They tend to spread. But red worms, just to give you the highlights, the reason we use red ones in aquaponic systems is because they can just survive without soil. And obviously, we don't want any soil directly in our media beds, maybe in our dual root zone pots. But down in the media, we want to, avoid soil. But they're going to be, helping you break down solids in your system, and you can even put different stuff in your media bed if you want to. Like I know people that put in like seaweed, for instance, different things like that.
Excrete minerals, I suppose.
Right. So like seaweed is a popular one to put into into your media beds and allow your worms to consume it. In addition to that, I have a red worm bin that I keep. I just feed it all of my excess fruit. So we feed it everything from banana peels to, apple cores. We even put like pits in there, like peach pits and different things like that, and let the worms clean them up. So we try to feed them. So pretty much any fruit or what I call flowering vegetable in there. So you definitely want to avoid too many greens if you're going to be supplementing an aquaponic system, because you'll be getting more nitrogen and adding it in when we already get tons of it. So that's kind of that learning curve I was talking about, with once you understand what you get out of aquaponics and what you need to add to supplement, then it becomes easier. And so that's what I use red worms for. I use them to break down different fruits that are essentially made of the things that I want, which are phosphorus, calcium, magnesium, and potassium. And so we want to break down pretty much anything that will give us that kind of content. Phosphorus is probably one of the harder ones to get. There's a lot of potassium in a lot of different fruit, but like beets is a great one. It has a pretty high phosphorus content. So if you can get beets somewhere to do a beet ferment, highly recommend that. Or just feed them right to your worms.
Grow some.
Yeah. And so
so the excretion, I want to clarify for the people that you might be talking a little. I mean, you've done a great job in the last year because of my questions, where you recognize that people don't understand some of what you're saying. And what you're saying though is by eating this, the fruit. What I wanted to get to is that by eating the fruit, they produce potassium in their excretion. It adds potassium as they eat it and poop it out, so to speak. Right?
Yeah, basically, that's the easiest way to think about it.
Available.
Right, and some of the microbiology in the worm bin gets involved also, but it's the best way to think about it is just that, fruit and flowers make flowers. That's the same stuff that it takes, which is all that stuff we talked about is all the same stuff your plants need to make the flowers that you're trying to grow. So rather than getting like Tommy was talking about being a salt farmer, getting a bottle that's full of your nutrients already broken down, you're feeding the worms or the microbes so that they will break down naturally the same stuff in what we call biomimicry. We're trying to mimic what happens in nature as opposed to just pour it in there with some salt preservatives on it that will build up over time.
Not the crack cocaine version of nutrients, right?
Yeah, I call it the McDonald's fast food version. That's basically what it is for your plants, which you maybe even every once in a while is fine, but over time, it's
I think it was the Bisquick version. Like you just buy a powder in a box and add water, and there your dinner's ready. Add syrup.
Right. Eat enough Happy Meals, and you will not be happy.
We got a bunch of questions from chat. So we have, is there one fish you would recommend to a beginner with small 4x8 bed of any sort?
Goldfish or koi?
Yep. That's what everybody tells me all the time.
Or paku if you're running real warm water.
Oh yeah, that's a good point.
You can't kill any of those fish.
Repeat that name, Steve?
Paku.
Paku. Okay.
It's one of the Pokemon.
Yep.
And when you say real warm water, what are you considering real warm water?
68 or above. 66 or above.
Okay.
What else? We got more questions from chat.
Yeah, go ahead with that, and I'll give you my other question to close out my segment. Yeah.
Sure. What is a good piping? We'll do that one for geothermal radial heating and stuff. We'll do that later. So media needs were bigger than DWC. I'm not sure what that was in reference to.
Media needs might be the fact that he was saying he used hydroton in his bed.
Aquaponics Machine, who's been on the show, it's Dave from Barbados, asks, why do you avoid soil?
Why do I avoid soil? I avoid soil in my media beds because it clogs, causes drain issues, has a tendency to go anaerobic when it stays wet constantly. So I use soil in dual root zone pots, but I try to keep it away from the cycling water systems because it becomes problematic for all those reasons I just said.
I'm having camera issues again, like we were before the show. What was another question on here? I thought. Looks like there wasn't. Okay. Go ahead. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
All right, what do you got, Roger?
Hey, all right. So this is something we've always had. Marty is big into, and everybody uses it. Steve's big into it. Chris Trump's real big into it, and we heard last time Marty was on the show, or a couple of shows ago, Marty was bringing up, once you pull out not even pulling up the cheese, but that there's different layers in your lactobacillus. So I wanted to touch base on Marty to, first I'd like to ask you, How did you come across it? Because Steve made a comment once about you being one of the early people that recognized the effects of it, and and we also did you get the idea from someone else? And
making labs? Is that what you're saying? For using that?
Labs, and then I want to talk about the serum.
Right. So I learned about labs through a group called the Probiotic Farmers Alliance. And shout out to one of my buddies, Cody, Coyote. He definitely, was sort of the catalyst behind me joining that group. So the Probiotic Farmers Alliance is essentially, they're a group that revolves around soil, but big into microbes. We've had Elaine Ingram on, so we've had Alan on. All those people are from the Probiotic Farmers Alliance, and so that's where I originally found out about it. And they're big on teaching you how to do it yourself. They want you to do it. Alan's great about sharing his Grow Kashi recipe, all that stuff. There's so many resources in that group. If you're not a member of it, definitely go join it. It's getting huge now. It's, like, I don't even know, 30,000 members plus. So obviously you get some testy people in there, and you will see cannabis pictures in there too. So obviously if that's going to offend you, then don't. But other than that, it's a great source for probiotic farming in general. And that's where I found out about labs to start with. And then to skip ahead to your question about the different layers when you're making labs. So I'll give you the fast forward version of making labs, which is, you start with your rice wash, where you're just taking water, you're washing rice, pouring it out, putting something over to cover it, letting it sit for a few days, and letting it gather microbes, essentially. And then you're adding your milk into it and whatever recipe that you want to be able to run with. There's plenty of them out there. You can just check it out, but you'll have a large amount of water and a relatively small amount of milk that you'll put in there to be able to ferment. Over time, you're going to get the curd layer, which forms at the very top. That's the solids that you see that eventually get made into cheese. If you want to do that, you can look up how to do that, make your own, salt it out. Plenty of people that have done that. The second layer down, which will be, and you have to let it sit. So if it's not just, if you pick it up and shake it up, this is not going to be there. We're dealing with essentially oil and water. So you want it to separate in that layer on the top. And when you let that curd form, if you look at it, you'll see that layer in between. Excuse me. So the curd will be sitting right on top of it. And you can extract that layer, which is technically the highest density of lactobacillus in that entire mix. Okay. Now, to be clear, there's probably lactobacillus throughout the curd, probably in the water column. Like, it's still going to be there, but the oil itself is the ideal environment for it to reproduce and live and all of that. So the oil, when it separates in between, is going to be the highest density of lactobacillus, of the bacteria that you're trying to access or get, is going to be in that oil. So however you extract it, because depending on what kind of container you have, you might be able to just pull the curd right off the top. Maybe you're going to leave it mixed with water. So you're just going to keep that bottom layer also and water that in, because you're going to water it in right away. But if you want to extract the highest concentration, you can get just that oil out, not take up the water, and be able to dose a large amount of microbes with a very small amount. Does that make sense, Roger?
So yeah, and so yeah, again, I got a perfect follow-up for both of that. So yeah, and this was what I wanted you to clarify for everyone out there, because we didn't really touch all the way. It wasn't. I didn't butt in that night. I'll say roll on. But so yeah, you can use the whole thing, and that would be more like if you wanted to do an immediate wash, is what you're saying. If you just wanted to shake it up after you remove the curd, you'd remove the curd, then you'd have the oil and the water column, as you called it. Sure. And you would shake that up, and that would be something you could water in immediately, like in a new beds, for instance.
Right.
But if you wanted to, you can somehow take one of those big hydroponic syringes or whatever, agricultural syringe, and make a hole in the curd, or remove the curd, like you said, is whatever you can do.
Right.
And then you can draw up that oil. So that would be basically more a concentrate.
It would be a concentrate. Yeah, it'd be like a lab concentrate. And so the other thing you can do if you don't have a syringe is if you take up a turkey baster and you suck it up, even if you get a little bit of water, figure out a way to stand it up. It will separate again. The oil will separate to the top, and you can just squeeze the water right out of the bottom.
Okay, so once you have that, are you saying then you would just inject that at small amounts, or would you then add water to it to use it?
Well, generally, like you could store it in a concentrated form, and then just add it to water when you do it, or you could add it right to your tanks if you want. If you're doing aquaponics, you know, you could put it in your, like, let's say you wanted to put a really concentrated dose into your filter paper, for instance. That might be something you wanted to do to help break down solids, or you got a media bed that you wanted to, like, for when I clean out my media bed, my outdoor beds, I always put labs in them at the start of the year to help break down solids and old roots and all that stuff before plants really start growing in them again. And so when I make a batch of labs to do that with, because I don't want to use like the Bokashi bran, for instance, because bran itself will add a little bit of nitrogen also, and will also add yeast, which can result in a SCOBY in your fish tank. For you guys know what a SCOBY is, Steve can probably tell you what the acronym stands for, but basically it's a microbe colony that like when you make kombucha, you have one that forms. So it's when yeast colonizes with bacteria, creates this little, looks like a hamburger patty. So anyway, when I want to add it to when I want to add labs without nitrogen or anything else, like adding any of that other stuff, and I want a high concentration, maybe I think I have a root issue would be another thing. Like if I have a plant that's showing signs of root rot, I would want to hit it with a high concentration of labs without giving it a lot of nutrients. And so that's when I would be looking to extract the oil and then getting as much of that as I could onto the roots of the plant itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you'd be injecting the infected root ball that I had root rot. And then okay, yeah, and that's what I wanted to clarify, whether, because I had the feeling that I'd watched videos and they used everything, and then you brought that up that night and we let it go on, and I never really got that answer, and I wanted to bring that up for our listeners too, because they're probably, I'm sure there's a lot of people that are smarter than me out there that wondered the same thing when you went by, like, wait a minute, did I watch the wrong video, or
Right.
What
also, the curd is a great probiotic additive for like your pets. Your dogs will love you. That's a great thing to do with it as well. If you don't want to, eat it yourself, which, you could do. Technically, it's definitely edible, or make it into cheese. You could do that as well. And again, that's got labs all throughout it also, just not the same concentration as in the oil.
Get a question from chat. It says, do you need to separate the oil and the water, or can you just suck it all up and dilute it?
You can just suck it all up and dilute it. Just make sure you include your existing water volume in whatever you calculate. So, just know that if you, like, let's say when you finish your labs, your batch of labs, and you have a gallon of water and a little bit of labs on top, you have to account for that gallon of water. So let's say you're making a 10-gallon recipe, you would only add 9 gallons, not 10 gallons. Otherwise, you're at 11. Maybe that's just slightly anal, but that's the way I do it.
So the other question we had, Scuba Steve asked, I poured old milk in my worm bin in 3 days. The numbers almost doubled of the worms. Any science or personal knowledge about that, or was it just coincidence?
So, I mean, it's essentially you're attracting labs by putting the milk on there in the same way that, that you would be making a ferment in sort of a more confined container. The worms are feeding off of the microbes and everything that's forming, that are being attracted by the food source, which in this case is the milk. So in the same way that you can, people have had success just straight feeding milk to their plants before and seeing benefits from it, it's really because of the labs. I think that would be my personal opinion. What do you think, Steve?
You have to remember that labs has a lot of fat in it, and it's very rich. It's extremely rich food, so it would provide more food for the worms in order to replicate. So it's probably the reason.
Yeah, I was thinking that too. Milk is fatty, and also just like anything in soil, it takes longer for everything to happen. So it's going to break down, and they're going to eat off of that because it's fatty. That was my thought too. Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, I got to take off. It's been good. Thanks for all the questions.
All right.
Yeah, thanks for being available for this. And as somebody who's primarily, just came in as a guest, you guys had us all established. I really appreciate your openness, how you share with the communities overall. Would like to say to folks, Marty, I'll give one more time, how to get to his website stuff and help support what he does. But I've just found this fascinating, this group here, and this group would not be here if it were not, for all the efforts over time that Marty has donated very generously to the community, and he shares very openly. And I just want to express my appreciation. I'm sure there's some folks out there who can't speak. They'd want to say the same to you. And just thanks, bro. We really appreciate you.
Awesome, man. So it's always been good having you since the first show. We always really enjoyed it, and we wanted to have you come back because we really felt like you were really open with us too, and we wanted to be able to you were open to being helped, which I think I just think that it's priceless to be able to help someone, especially when they are medicating themselves in a manner in which a lot of people do. So we want to help you guys, and it feels good to do it. It feels so good it's almost selfish. So
well, you converted this salt farmer. I'll never be a salt farmer again.
Excellent. Glad to hear it. And really kudos to Steve. Like he's gotten every guest and put all that stuff together, and I can't even imagine the number of spam emails the man has had to send to get all the people that he's gotten. But I appreciate it, and it's been fun for me just to show up and ask questions of people that otherwise I should have no business even talking to. So it's been awesome, and can't wait to see who Steve harasses into coming on the show next.
The next 100 shows. I hope you're here, buddy.
All right. See you guys later.
Great talking, Marty. Thanks.
Yeah.
I want to give a big shout out to Jeff Lowenfels for microbes too. We didn't name him a while ago.
Well, Steve, Marty's gone, so I'm gonna put you in the hot seat.
Uh-oh.
And it was a brilliant question for Marty to start out with. I'd like to start out with the same, and if anybody's joining us a little bit late in the show here, it's kind of where I start with Marty. Is Steve, how basically did you first get into growing? And I know some of your background, and then what is it that made you go from growing to jumping into aquaponics as a method? Because if you don't know about this kind of stuff, it almost looks stupid. It's like, why would you do that? Well, and I know we've heard comments from people over and over and over, and I know some of your background, people will constantly tell you things you cannot do, and you reply with pictures of the exact thing that they're telling you that you can't do. So how did you get started in growing overall, and what made you jump into this weird space that almost nobody knows about of aquaponics?
So my grandparents lived really close to me when I was a kid, and they took care of me quite a bit when I was younger. And they had a 2-acre farm or a 2-acre property, and the whole back acre was a whole farm. And they kind of take in all kinds of people from all over. They grew up during the Depression. They would make their own pesticides, make their own cloning gel, make their own nutrients, compost tea, Like, I grew up making compost tea. We grew up taking tomato leaves and fermenting those and making a tomato leaf ferment and potato leaf ferment and putting it on the grapevines to getting rid of the Japanese beetles and things like that. That was just stuff we did. It was just, you know, you grew certain plants just for their purpose as a pesticide, or just because it was high in iron. You know, we grew stinging nettle because we could make good tea. You mix the nettle with the comfrey, you make a really good compost tea, especially for plants if they're recovering from like a hailstorm or something. Is really good for help building them back up. And just that, all that kind of stuff is stuff that I've been doing as long as I can remember, doing, you know, permaculture and you know, reasonably, you know, organic soil. Every now and then we'd buy something from the store, but for the most part, we, you know, made almost all of our stuff. You know, they grew up during the Depression. There was no store to go buy that stuff, and if there was, it was too expensive, so they had to figure it out. And that's where a lot of my base came from. And then ended up also working in the aquarium trade growing up. When I was 12, I ended up getting a job in the aquarium trade, which was super cool, at a place called Pet Fantasy back in Pennsylvania. And they had a pretty cool exotic animal room, but also not them in particular, but I ended up working at quite a bit of other aquarium places. And if you're in the pet trade, there's a lot of less than legal activities going on, I would say, as we allegedly.
Allegedly.
So there were quite a bit of growing and you know, other things going on in the animal trade scene. You know, they have all these lights, they can justify it, blah 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 blah. Easy to filter your smells through your water and all that, allegedly. Thankfully, they don't need to do that anymore with all the legalization and everything. But and we'd also, you know, same time sell people grow lights. You know, I was paid commission if I sold, you know, above X amount of money. So we got used to really good at selling people grow lights and working with a lot of growers, you know, clandestine, you know, talking about growing in a pet store, but not really talking about growing. And we'd start carrying like grow nutrients and stuff for plants, for planted aquariums and stuff like that. And we had, you know, 1,000-watt halides, you know, for people's reef tanks. You know, I don't know, I got 12,000-watt halides on my reef tank. Like, what? You know, nobody's got a reef tank that big. Like, we both know damn well.
You like your fish boiled, don't you?
Yeah, and I need a CO2 regulator for my fish tank. You know, and you know, this, that, and the other. So, you know, they come pick up CO2 tanks from the. So I got to learn and talk to a lot of growers, you know, from a young age that were growing in kind of, you know, less than legal lands, shall we say. And then ended up hooking up with a gentleman who I'll leave out his name, who was growing quite a few plants back on the East Coast and taught me quite a bit about cannabis specifically. He had a big old building. I'm going to be super vague about this in case it's still
quite
there.
a few plants, meaning more than 6 plants, correct?
Yeah, it was
Okay.
more than 400 plants. I'll leave it at that. But had a large building and was growing considerable amount, and it was the most I had ever seen at that point, and especially live plants. And I had sold him so much products over the years. He finally trusted me, invited me over one day. So we got, you know, he taught me a whole bunch of stuff. And then finally I had the opportunity, and then I worked in the pet trade for quite a bit of time. I was in IT for a while. And then I ended up working at a place called this landscaping company back in Pennsylvania. And they had a huge set of greenhouses. So I got a chance to manage, you know, a bunch of different greenhouses, a whole bunch of different, you know, flats, fruit trees, did a bunch of pond design work and all kinds of stuff like that in order to, you know, which was a really good experience working on commercial scale cannabis stuff later on. So I had a nice blend of, you know, this, that, and the other to come into the cannabis aquaponic world. So I ended up moving to Colorado, and I think it was 2010 or 2011. Worked in the pet trade for a bit, worked in the cannabis trade for a bit, and then the floods happened, and then everything got all screwed up, and then ended up putting in the word aqua into Craigslist and ended up working at the Aquaponic source. Well, 2 weeks after I got hired there, because I had a pretty extensive chemistry background for aquariums and everything else. She was wanting to do more aquarium. Sylvia, the owner, was looking to do more aquarium products and just develop the product line and stuff like that. And I had a pretty good background on it. So they're at a meeting and they're like, does anybody here know anything about cannabis growing? And I was like, is this like a test or something that you just like fuck with your new guys? Like, try and, you know, will you fire me if I raise my hand kind of thing? Like,
Good question.
yeah, like I didn't know if it was a litmus test or something. So she was like, all right, nobody, okay. And then finally I raised my hand at the end, and I was like, I kind of know a thing or two. And I was like, actually, here's my full resume. And I gave her my CV, and she goes, oh, okay, you should have told me. We would have like probably, you know, hired you under different circumstances. So it was pretty funny. So we ended up running a whole division. Me and the other product development guy ran a 50 by 30 by 18 greenhouse, and did a whole geothermal, solar, water heater, heat exchangers. We actually ran glycol in them. We built a whole R&D greenhouse. We had wicking beds, we had flood and drain beds, we had media beds. We ran all different kinds of experiments. We did 55-gallon drums. We did fruit trees. We did all manner of fish. We did different fish densities. We did all different kinds of pest sprays. We did all different kinds of mold sprays. You name it. We just use it as a test bed for all kinds of R&D. Aside from, so they also had an R&D lab actually at their production facility, which was pretty cool. And ended up working and doing a bunch of that, and kind of taking my cannabis knowledge and my aquaponics or my aquarium knowledge and hybridizing it. But my first time I worked with aquaponics was actually, you could call it aquaponics, was, I don't know if anyone remembers, Tetra and a couple of other companies used to sell a product called river tanks, or river tank inserts. And it was like a plastic insert that you'd silicone into your aquarium, and it would make these nice, beautiful tiered aquariums that, you know, you could have frogs and stuff, but the water would channel into had little tiny channels, so the water would go to where all the plants were. So it always had a tiny little like drip or trickle into where all the plants were. So it was an aquaponics system. The plants would actually filter the water and keep the water from getting rancid from all the reptile waste or frog waste or fish waste. It was a way to keep it clean, keep it from being smelly. And that I got really into doing living biomes. So I would do drop ceiling. I don't know if you guys are familiar with drop ceiling, the light diffuser. That's like a grid square. It's like just a square, or you know, a grid of little squares. You can snap that and zip tie it together, and it makes a great base, super strong. You can make really cool substructures. You can put a little bit of great stuff foam on it, the black great stuff foam, and then put your moss or your bark onto it. Put a little bit of fishing line to tie it on until it dries. You can cut the fishing line off, and moss and plants and everything will grow right to it. You can sprinkle in some soil. You know, put a nice little screen across the top of it. Put a nice little soil or cocoa layer. Put some nutrients in it so that you can actually have, you know, beautiful terrariums that look like they're, you know, look like you took a chainsaw and just sawed out a piece of the Amazon and then put it inside the aquarium. You know, that's the kind of stuff I used to build, and I used to build them for the pet store, and then I'd get a really good chunk of change for them. It was actually, it's been a hobby of mine since I was a teenager, is building really beautiful terrariums and making sure that all the water is integrated in with the plants. You don't have to do anything but just top the thing off, you know, feed the fish and what other creatures are in there, and just, you know, occasionally prune stuff so that it's very low maintenance, and that, you know, it just kind of sustains itself. That's what I like doing. So aquaponics is very similar, you know, it's right up the same alley. And then when I worked at the aquaponics source, I got really into the chemistry, and I realized that there's a lot of tools out there that we have for every other industry that we don't have. So when I first started this, no one could tell me, hey, what's the parts per million value for everything that you need to aim for? What should my phosphorus be? What should my potassium be? What should my magnesium be? What should my zinc be? What should my molybdenum be? Blah, 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 blah. And that's the kind of stuff that was frustrating, and no one was really talking about silica in aquaponics. You know, no one was talking about advanced lighting. No one was talking about VPD. Vapor pressure deficit. No one was talking about a lot of these things that really matter, especially when you get to commercial scale stuff, because everyone was so stuck mentally doing backyard aquarium stuff and doing, you know, a backyard IBCs, or doing aquariums, and there's a handful of commercial ones, but no one was actually thinking about it from from the same angle as like the major scale hydro guys or the big weed guys, and applying some of this stuff that actually streamlines a lot of our processes and reduces labor. So one of the first things we did when I did Aquaponic Source was try to establish what our baselines were. So I reached out to Charlie Schultz, who's been on the show many times, and Ken and a whole bunch of other farm owners and universities, and got a whole bunch of data on as many crops as I could get my hands on, and then averaged out the data for each of the different crops. So I actually had a reasonable baseline. Now, it might be slightly off, but it ain't going to be off by much, because this is what all these different universities had really good tissue sample taste testing and root test, and all the different testing data that came along with it. So it's a pretty good baseline to use. It's not perfect, but it's the best that we have for our field.
Steve, if I can, I wanted to. You're starting to go into a subject that I wanted to bring up. I specifically had with you, and you're on YouTube. Why the hell should anybody listen to you? And what you're starting to talk about before we get into the commercial side, because I know what you do there. I work with you. There's science versus YouTube opinion, and there's research. And there's a lot of people who know stuff, and I've over the years I've literally watched people tell you can't do something, and I've literally watched you send a picture to them. Oh, this thing right here, I can't do it, huh? And it's like kind of no duh, but this is the reason I have stuck with this show is I've been to your classes and stuff. Can you take a minute, and maybe I'm going to give you a little bit of a free rein here to rant, okay? But you're starting to get into it. Talk about science versus somebody with an opinion. And you might mute there. There you go.
We kind of touched on this a little bit last week, and I think the week before, with Josh, who's been joining the show and dropping from the show. I guess he's having connection issues at the moment. From Dutch Blooms, is that
he's brilliant. The seminars he puts together, that man is incredible. Yeah.
So what we like to talk about is the science, or what we were talking about before is the science of organic versus the religion of organics. And you could say like the science of aquaponics versus the religion of aquaponics. Like thankfully, you don't really hear too much anymore, like people saying, oh, you just feed the fish and everything else just does its own thing. Like it just works. It's magic. Like thankfully, the people that were spewing that have kind of been either drowned out or have moved on or have gone out of business. You're kind of on the second or third wave of aquaponic,
right.
people, I guess, for lack of a better word. And at least the people that are pushing it publicly and that are hosting different events and blah blah blah. The other big thing that now is that you also have like the Aquaponics Association, which is hosting a bunch of really good events and putting out a bunch of good information and trying to work with the USDA now and a bunch of other stuff to help kind of steer the ship in a right direction a little bit, messaging wise, as an industry.
But they're not just yelling at the top of their lungs their religion. They are showing up with hard data. You guys are at the forefront, and the team you work with, Ken and Charlie and James Ricosi. I mean, golly, these people are awesome. And like we had an opportunity, I'm not going to mention the man's name, but somebody who is known around the world in the cannabis industry, and he was showing off his not aquaponic system, but his hydroponic system to you that was in front of his house and whatever. And I'm looking at this world famous person and what he's showing off in some technology, and I'm like, oh my gosh, did you draw your plants with crayons? And he's very well known and has done tremendous things for the cannabis industry. But he was showing this to you and other people who have the science. And where would you suggest people go to find these things? Do they go to UVI? Is it somebody starting out? Do they start out on Marty's channel? where are the places, because there's just so many voices out there,
Start on this
for
channel.
somebody like me who doesn't even know what questions to ask when I first started on this. I at least know what questions to ask now after hanging around you guys for so long. But you know, how can the listeners or people who catch this, you know, later on, what would you tell them to guide them towards where to set their bullshit meter?
Sure. So I would just say, you know, scholar.google.com is always awesome, first of all. I was actually going to ask Marty a similar question. I was going to ask Marty what books he recommends to people. I think I'll mention that too. So Dr. Rush's Hydroponic Food Production. I would say, actually, I was just finishing up Dr. Leonard Wilson's Commercial Aquaponic Systems. This is a good book. It ships from Australia, so it'll take a week or two to get to you, but it's a good book. And then you know, Sylvia's book, if you're a newbie, what is it? Aquaponic Gardening, I think it is. And then you know, there's a bunch of good technical cannabis books out there. I'm trying to think of one that comes to mind in particular. I'm drawing a blank at the moment, but there's
or cannabis and or vegetables, because I understand a lot of the viewers of this show are just into typical aquaponics, and you know, even though if they're not doing cannabis, they're coming and trying to find out what you guys know, because your methodologies, and this kind of goes into the next point of the commercial. This is not a hobby to you, Steve. This is not, you know, something like you just have feels about. You have people that fly you around and bring you to their farms who are not doing cannabis to save their ass, basically, and get something back on track. And it's all fun and games it's in the backyard, but you know, when you've invested $1 million, all bets are off, and that kind of goes back to some of the science. So yeah, if there's stuff on just regular vegetable and commercial stuff, is it worth people to be looking into that, even though it might be above their head, or above, not above their head, I'm not trying to be insulting, above their aspirations? What are there resources there too?
Sure. So I guess other good books would be Jeff Lowenfeld's Teaming with Microbes, Teaming with Nutrients, Teaming with Fungi. Those are really awesome. Elaine Ingham has a whole bunch of great info, both you know, lectures and you know, classes and other things that she does. If you're wanting to really go down the rabbit hole of microbes, she's definitely up there. I'm trying to think who else has content that I go to regularly. I'm kind of spoiled. I get to just hit up half these people directly. So.
When you were talking about cannabis a while ago, aren't some of the were you thinking about Greg Green or Jorge Cervantes? Were you thinking about them?
Cervantes' book is good. Cervantes' book was the first one I ever read. Rosenthal has a bunch of good books. Ed Rosenthal, he's been on the show.
Ed's awesome.
Trying to think who else is book-wise. I'm sure I'm just drawing a blank right now. There's another book. It's called like it's a yellow book called like Aquaculture Design and something or other. I was trying to actually pull up the name of it, and I can't seem to rack my brain for it at the moment. That's another great book as well that I would highly recommend to people. And then if you're new to the show or relatively new to the show, episodes 1 through 16 to 20 are kind of a newbie guide. Marty and I go through a lot of the basics. I go through all the nutrients and what your options are for different substances. I should probably update that again because I've changed that a little bit. Maybe at some point. I'm trying to finish my book right now and then put that out, and then maybe after the book's out, I'll cover those again.
One thing I'd like to mention in season 1, I mean on episode 1, it's only 15 minutes into the show before they're discussing the dual root zone. So it's not like you have to go to episode 1 and then wait till episode 12 to learn about the dual root zone. They'll get right into the basic bam. That's why when Tommy asked him, well, what would you have them, where would you have them start? I think episode 1 of Growing with Fishes is one of the best places you could ever start if you want to go aquaponics and grow cannabis or vegetables. It's not a book, but it will definitely give you a lot of insight, and you'll be able to understand what's being talked about here on a weekly basis.
We had a question from Chad. It goes, how do you flush aquaponics? Replace the fish with fresh water, or would you GWC or DWC? Actually, I don't flush my plants at all in aquaponics. I will stop dosing any additional nutrients if I'm supplementing maybe the last 3 or 4 weeks of the plant's life, but I didn't just feed aquaponic water. But with the dual root zone, I just let them drink. They're fine. They flush themselves. It's not really our nutrient levels we're running are anywhere from 1/4 to 1/8 of the level that most hydroponic growers are running for most nutrients. So we don't really have to flush anything. There's no heavy nutrient load to flush out.
Yeah, that was good. I like that. I'm glad they asked that question. That's good. Yeah, there's very lower concentration of minerals in the water in aquaponics than there is in hydroponics, or especially in soil with a buildup.
Yeah.
So I had a question again on commercial. What are some of the major differences between somebody who's going to begin this maybe as a hobby or whatever, and let's say they have an eye towards getting bigger? What would you want them to keep track of as they're starting, or if we have people who are looking at maybe converting part of their farm to this methodology? I know you're very dedicated to changing the way agriculture works across the planet, and that gets you right into commercial. What I mean, I'm loosely associated with the ag side of the business. What would you want people to know that are like coming here? Like there was a guy who wound up at one of Dutch's science heavy things. He came down from the big old farm in Montana. He looked like the Marlboro Man. You never thought he'd be here. Here he is. He's falls in love with the Rasta who's teaching him how to love his family's legacy. His family's been serving that farm. They've been commercial farmers, and they're bringing these new methodologies on. What's some of the stuff people need to be aware of or should be thinking of in that realm?
So the biggest differences between the commercial and the home system, I guess, if you're trying to go from one to the other, I would say pick out some strains and get to know 6 or 8 strains really well and get them adjusted to your AP system and your methodology, whatever it is that you choose to do, and stick with that. And then as far as how it differs, on large scale, you do light depth and then you plumb it differently. So you're gonna change the plumbing rather than moving a couple hundred plants, because it's way less labor, and labor will just kill you, especially with you got to remember the price of weeds falling. You're lucky if you're going to get, and it can be as low as $100 a pound right now on the West Coast, depending on where you're at. So it's brutal. So you got to make sure you're spending as little in labor as possible.
So you accomplish that by not moving plants, by having a system like Marty was talking about with his IT systems. So basically, you're going to turn this valve, turn this valve, turn that valve, and different nutrient or fish water is going to flush through those areas as the plants need change throughout the cycle. Maybe they need more of the P things, instead of the N things when they're fruiting or something.
Yep. So you'll have separate sumps and separate tanks that are designed for veg or flower, and then you'll have light depth, and you just section it all off, and you handle that differently. The filtration's obviously different. The scale of the mineralization tanks and microbe tanks goes up considerably. So that's kind of the biggest differences.
Maybe if somebody's not making the jump to that, let's say they're like they have their local community of people that are growing this, that, and the other thing, and maybe they step out a little bit more. Is it something like where maybe somebody could be brewing teas and learning some of the lactobacillus stuff and the different ferments and the remineralizations, and then on the side getting these power pizzas of awesome stuff to their buddies who are maybe still doing the soil growing. Is that maybe a good interim for people to start getting into that?
Oh yeah, and all the stuff we use in aquaponics we can use in soil. We talk about that regularly on the show, but if it works for us, it'll work in soil or it'll work in hydro. Unless you're doing our totally dead, sterile hydro, that I guess wouldn't work the same way, but everything else would work.
That's funny. You said something about hydro because we changed the subject a while back when you were on a roll, and I was intent on you finishing your comments, but I wanted to get you back to a couple minutes before then. You had mentioned how there's a lot of things that you're using in aquaponics that have been a staple of use, have had a staple of use in both soil and hydro, and how it's made your labor a lot easier. And I didn't want to interrupt you at the time, but what I wanted to add is when you said that, what you're basically saying is you can take a hydroponic system and turn it into an aquaponic system and basically do nothing but add a fish tank, and some filtering, and depending on how you design it. But your hydroponic system can be used. Well, not every hydroponic system, because I don't think you'd want to spray, try to spray.
Anything with sprayers or drip lines is a no-go. Like,
right.
You'll see like, what is it, Zip Grow, sometimes they'll have the drippers and stuff. You'll spend more time cleaning those drippers than you do ever tending your plants.
Right. If anything, you could maybe make your own custom PVC and drill holes in it so that it wouldn't get clogged up. But I'd also basically ebb and flow is the way to go.
Or just use half-inch plumbing instead and just change the flow rate to be slow.
Yeah. There you go. Well, you can basically flood a tray on one end, and just with running a PVC, 3/4 inch PVC, and just flood it, and then have your how your height, your drain where you want the height of your solution to be. So it's really, I'm a hydroponic farmer, and I've built every system there is for hydroponics, and so I'm really looking forward, because I got plumbing laying all over the place and all different sizes, and I am really looking forward to getting these fish. Oh, I want to make an announcement on that note, and I'm going to give it back to anybody that I haven't got to really ask my questions yet, but I wanted to hear what Mr. Green Jeans had to ask you. But I want to make an announcement. Yesterday I made the first. That's why I tried to call you back, Steve. I made my first step towards my aquaculture license in the Carolinas. So,
congratulations, Roger.
It's
been a long time coming for you. Awesome.
Well, I didn't really try to go get it before, but I decided I needed to call DNR and I needed to call the Department of Ag. I had to call them both. And it turns out, well, I don't want to monopolize this time right now and talk about my farm that I'm building, but I just wanted to announce that I did take the first steps yesterday.
All right.
And I'm waiting on my aquaculture license. We're going to go down and take care of everything here next week. So I'm excited. Maybe tomorrow. Depends on if I can get it locally. We've got a DNR office right down the street, but the way government works, it'd probably be the wrong building. But a shout out to Chad at the DNR. And, well, I'm not going to say where exactly. It's got to be a little bit too close, But.
Hey, I don't know if we lost Steve there. I see his kind of screen up. Okay, if you're still there was something that came up from Marty, and I know Marty could have answered it, but I just happen to know your background with fish. And if I remember from just listening cursively, aren't the labs and fish really good friends too?
Yeah, we talked about this a little bit last episode.
Okay, that's where I heard it. Okay.
Yeah, and I was going to bring that up earlier too, because Marty did say that earlier, but indirectly he said, because he was saying you could dump it right in your fish tank. So yeah, it's safe.
But specifically, the fish themselves do better. So even if you're just, if I understand this, and again, I'm the noob. I'm sorry if I'm asking the stupid noob questions, but even if you're just going into it for the fish, forget the back end with the vegetables, the labs are even just good for your fish business. Correct?
Yeah. They showed
Okay.
a 15% increase in fish growth, but they're doing additional studies on that right now at University of Kentucky State.
That's interesting. I got to start looking at that. University, Kentucky State, isn't it Kentucky State University?
That paper isn't published yet, by the way.
It's not published. Okay.
No,
What's the matter? Isn't the ink dry yet, Steve?
It will be published. They've already done talks on the abstract already. They just haven't finished the final paper.
I bet you could call them. When I call universities, I usually don't have any problem getting to talk to somebody.
Hold on. I can pull up the name of the paper, actually.
While Steve's looking at that, Mr. Green Jeans, did you have any questions you wanted to ask Steve about, his background or any of these kinds of things, since he's in the hot seat getting interviewed today rather than being the guy?
I missed a whole section when I had to go up and save the ante, so I'm not sure.
Oh, it was fine. We were talking bad about you while you were gone, and we all shut up when you came back,
All that we talked about, Steve was giving his background, which a lot of it you've heard as a panelist or a friend,
That's what I was curious about. I wanted to hear that. I was like, where did you study the Shaolin Kung Fu? Your Kung Fu is very good.
So the name of the paper that evaluates called The Evaluation Development of Aquaponics is the evaluation and development of aquaponics as a potential source of fresh and safe vegetables and fish for urban minority populations. That is the exact paper name and study name at University of Kentucky State that did the lactobacillus work.
That is cool. One thing you're just in the title of that I absolutely love about what you guys collectively are working towards, is that you can go into a underserved neighborhood that has been neglected, because they don't have the money to lobby and this, that, and the other thing. You can drop one of your farms basically on a Superfund site. Okay. You're self-contained. You can reduce the food miles. And in some of these neighborhoods, there's a mom and pop shop. There's not, and a few McDonald's. Within miles, there's not the resources there. You guys can go in, put something in the community that not only keeps the dollars in the community, greatly increases the nutrition density for that dollar, without all the hydrocarbons of moving the food in. And some of these neighborhoods, people won't even go in and sell them food. And on top of all of that, you're teaching a life skill that can uplift the community. This is a little my political stuff. I think that is awesome. We got all the problems down in Puerto Rico. You guys are able to go, down to areas like that and because they have to pay the worst shipping. My girlfriend's Puerto Rican, if everybody doesn't know. And in order to get something to Puerto Rico, a ship has to drive past Puerto Rico, go to America, be put on an American ship on the single most expensive shipping on the waterways that there is. They're raping Puerto Ricans, and these are fellow American citizens, okay? And so they are bleeding, paying through the nose for 2-week-old vegetables because of all this double transport and everything. And yet you guys are able to go into a place like Puerto Rico or some of the inner city kinds of stuff and teach skill sets, put dense nutrition, and instead of people running around banging, they're getting a life skill that they can take with them everywhere, because people have to eat everywhere. And that's personally my political stuff, one of the most awesome things that I think you guys are up to.
Thanks. Yeah, just that's we work with a whole bunch of different groups and stuff, so it's a lot of fun. Mr. Green Jeans, you had a question? I'm sorry, I kind of missed it with the follow-up.
He's on mute. There you go.
Oh, no, I was more curious about early Steve in Philadelphia. And where did you learn that amazing Kung Fu? Who did you?
I was
Come on,
into
tell me.
anything living, and computers was kind of what I grew up doing. So
Have brothers and sisters?
yeah, I have a biological sister,
And she's older than you,
just younger.
younger.
Yep.
Cool. Philadelphia.
Did you shoot your sister with a BB gun like I shot mine?
No,
And then tried to convince her it was a bee that stung her so she wouldn't tell mom?
I did take her Barbie Corvette and take the Barbies out, put 2 toads in it, and strap a couple of SD's rockets to the back.
Oh, brothers are so mean. Until you mess with our sister, then we're gonna talk.
Yeah, so my sister and I don't talk too much, but if somebody fucked with her, man, I'd be on the next flight back to Philly. No, we are.
You're still in touch with both of your parents, or yeah?
Yep.
They're still alive.
Yep.
That's awesome. I just talked to a friend of mine the other day. Don't want to change the subject, but he's taking care of both his parents at home, and they're both 94. It's pretty cool. I mean, you know, they're still together at 94 and able to live at home, and their son takes care of them full time. It's pretty cool. And I was like, I know them both. We grew up together. I knew him since he was 14. How your parents? He's, well, mom can't get around too good. She has a bad leg, and dad's getting a little spongy. I should have done that in a Massachusetts accent. He's from Massachusetts. Dad's getting a little spongy.
Massachusetts.
Yeah, he's from Massachusetts.
I'm an East Coast boy too. Yeah.
We should probably get that guy on the. He did 20. My friend Fred Berthoff. He's kind of a famous. He did 20 years in the federal for smuggling hashish.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I should ask him. We should get him on here. I know he's a real interesting character. So he did. I guess probably did the 20 years because he didn't wouldn't give up anybody else or whatever.
In the Reagan administration?
Yeah, he just got out. He's been out about 8 years now, 10 years, something like that, 8 years. But yeah, Frederick Berthoff. He was kind of a famous inmate. He did a lot of. He wrote a lot of books and stuff while he was in there. And cool. I didn't mean to change the subject from you, Steve. Thinking about Fred and your parents, the family.
Were there any questions from chat for you, Steve, since I can't see that side of it that you wanted to
there was
pick up on?
Where do you see aquaponics in 20 years? I could see aquaponics taking an increasingly large share of both the cannabis and indoor vegetable market. I think there's a lot of crops it just doesn't make financial sense for. Field crops, anything you can grow in a field crop extensively. You wouldn't really do CBD hemp in aquaponics. Just, again, you grow it in the field. It's cheaper.
But you've got that tech for undergirding the field, don't you?
Well, we have lower overhead. We have lower overhead and we have increased CBD production compared to a lot of stuff. But even then, it doesn't. At certain crops, it doesn't make sense for Marty was talking about corn. We actually have corn growing in our showroom right now at Ouroboros. So I'll take a video of that and throw that up on YouTube just for Marty.
What are you using? Fertigation for your hemp and your corn?
What's that?
You talking about burying drip tape at the root zone?
Oh, actually, so it's funny you mentioned that. There actually is a large farm near San Diego, actually near Coachella. Actually, it's probably a better way to put it. Where they do, I think it's 2 million gallon tilapia tanks, if memory serves me right. And then they do drip lines out to moringa, and they grow moringa trees and do moringa beans and moringa leaves. And that's very profitable for them in that climate. But you need a pretty warm climate.
That's something that's they've been researching a lot around because of the depleted farms and all.
Oh yeah, I have a former customer I still talk to from the aquaponic source. It's in West Virginia, and he has a big greenhouse and he grows moringa and he sells it. He actually grows a whole bunch of different herbs and sells it just to the organics market out there. He's the only guy selling organic anything in his part of West Virginia. It's not part of the culture there, and there's a demand for it, and he's the only guy selling anything that's organic at all. So, you know, it's pretty awesome, especially if you can find a little niche and you are in the boonies. But yeah, maybe tourists that pass through the area, or you're near a highway or something. It can be a good way to, you know, generate revenue.
Anyway, it's an excellent way to, you know, provide food for yourself. You know, once you get it down and master it, you can have fish. You can choose the type of fish because you can use different tanks for different systems. So you can have a variety of fish if you really wanted to, and you're going to, if you're willing to put the money into it and the time, because there'll be a lot of, there is labor now. Don't think that you're just going to throw fish in a tank and get it all set up and not have any work to do. There's no days off when you're growing food or cannabis. But there was another question, Steve, earlier when you were reading Marty questions that you said you'd wait for later. They asked you something technical. It was a technical question, and you were going to wait till later. So that would have been earlier in the chat.
Yeah, I don't remember what it was at this point.
Oh, I thought it was, oh, okay. I thought you had it there.
Unless Tommy does. Was it PPMs or something? I don't know.
No, it was when we had all those questions we asked Marty from chat. From the chat room.
Oh, it was a chat question.
There was one that you bypassed because it was a technical. I can't remember if it was a chemical question or see, it was some kind of.
Oh, yeah. So, what is a good piping to use for laying geothermal radiant heating? I would use the PEX line like you use for gas line, like for your stove in your home. That works really well, and you can get nice pressure fittings on it. It won't leak at all, and then run glycol through that. That is what I would use. It works really, really, really well.
Glycol is what you run, huh?
A glycol instead of water, because if it gets too cold, it won't freeze and break your lines. If you use water and it freezes, it'll bust your lines all to shit. I know, I've done it.
Yeah, see, you get PEX pipe.
I've replaced all of those lines. And I busted.
It comes in 3 or 4 different specifications too. You know, they even use it for water. It's not just, well, you said something, but it's basically you can plumb your whole house with PEX pipe now. Hot water, cold water, chemicals. They make it for chemicals. You might even want to look into that with glycol, Steve. You think you'd have to have
a PEX like the black PVC. This is like steel, what is it, stainless steel line like you use for gas lines. It's not the black PVC. When I say PEX, I'm not talking about the black stuff.
I'm talking about red, white, and blue, the colors that I see PEX in.
No, this is
a white one and a blue one.
Maybe I'm referring to it wrong. Let me find it. Hold on.
But anyway, with radiant floor heating, it is common to use PEX pipe. So that is common. And now maybe there's more commercial grades, and maybe that's but there's several different grades of PEX pipe.
Okay, the exact name at Home Depot, it's called Home Flex.
Home Flex. Okay.
Home Flex 1/2 inch, 25-foot CST corrugated stainless steel. You can get it in different lengths. But that's stainless. That's what we were using.
Cool.
And then there's a yellow insulator on it. You want to strip the insulator and use that in the water, and then connect that. Use that as your heat exchanger. It works very well.
And there you go.
That's a super technical question. That's what the show is for.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I like that you bridge the gap between having that commercial knowledge, having that experience, having had to dig up the goddamn pipes and relay them, and I'll never make that mistake again, which is so much different than people just having opinions. It's like, the reason I'm saying this is because I had sweat running down my ass when I made the mistake, because I had to dig it up and replace it. You know, and I really respect that about the crew that hangs out here. You know, it's not pretentious. It's not the religion. It's like, yeah, this is a real world stuff. You have the commercial experience. Roger has the commercial experience. You know, Marty's just a digger and a researcher and a trier. You know, and it's nice to see that whole blend and how it works out here.
Another good example would be airlifts. You know, airlifts burn through a lot more iron than non-airlifts do, and then they also, if you stack aeration too much with airlifts, you can actually make it impossible to bring your pH down into the range that you want it. So that can be a real challenge. So that's definitely something. Again, if you've never done a large scale one of those, and there aren't many people that have, you wouldn't have run into such a problem. You know what I mean? So there's just different things that you run into, but that's why it's a lot of fun to do consulting. You get to see different ways that you never knew you could screw up a system, and different insects that you didn't know existed, different chemical imbalances. You know, I've seen people with super high alkalinity and the pH is like 4.5, and I'm like, fuck if I know how you chemically did that, but it you know,
It's
my
not gonna
testing
work.
equipment isn't lying to me, but goddamn if I could figure out how the hell you did that, you know, like, and silly stupid shit like that. And then also just working on aquarium stuff. Like, I don't know if I've ever said this story online about the dentist office I worked on when I was on the used to work in the aquarium trade. So there's a dentist office, and I used to do aquarium maintenance once upon a time. I was Deuce Bigelow's job, you know, mine before he was the Bigelow part.
Mm.
And, so I went into a dentist office, and anything in this fish tank would die in 48 hours. Put new fish in, 48 hours, they're dead. Took the tank out of the wall, put a brand new tank that was set up in the pet store for a month with fish in it, fully cycled, put it in, all the fish die within 48 hours, send it out, all kinds of water testing, nothing's showing up on the water tests. It's like the tank is cursed. So I put a hidden camera in the office because I just convinced that there was an employee poisoning the fish or something like that. Like that's where I was at with this whole thing. So we were the second or third company hired to work on this fish tank, and nobody could figure out what the hell was killing this fish. At 48 hours later, every 24 to 48 hours later, the fish would die no matter what. And it makes no sense. There's no chemistry solution. There's, you know, I got a camera on the tank. I know no one's putting anything in there. Like I've eliminated every variable. I've literally replaced every piece of equipment, every molecule of water, like everything you can think of. Okay, and it's a dentist's office. What's the problem? And Tommy can't answer this because he's heard this talk before.
I would think some kind of gas that's in there, or no, I don't know. I was thinking get some chemical that they use in the dental office.
Roger's damn near on.
There's a reason Roger's a commercial grower.
So next to the fish tank on the far right, 2 cabinets over, was the nitrous tanks and the oxygen tanks. Well, the lines ran straight up into the ceiling and across the drop ceiling. Well, the drops, when they had new light fixtures installed in the office, and that's when all this shit started. Well, the guy that ran the new electrical nicked the gas line, nicked the line above the tank where the nitrous was, not enough to depressurize it significantly, but just enough to have a trickle, and it was precipitating through the drop ceiling, falling into the rim, the tiny rim at the top of the tank, and then melding into the water and basically gassing the fish with nitrogen. And then when we sent it off, it was off gassing by the time we sent it off for sampling. And that was the craziest, most screwed up, hard to figure out thing I think I've run into, where it was just I was ready to pull my hair out, and it was just like I don't know. And here it was this gas line in the ceiling. So we got that fixed, and the fish stopped dying. So it was good. That was by far, I think, probably the screwiest thing. I mean, I've had people ask me if they could jerk off into the fish tank to feed their baby fish fry with a straight face because they saw it on YouTube. They heard it on YouTube or some shit.
Oh, YouTube against science again. There we go.
YouTube scientists are always jerking off on their fish tank. I've had people do OxyClean in their aquaponic systems because it'll just add oxygen and it can't hurt the fish.
And Willie Mays looked good in a beard. He did.
Yeah, Willie Mays did great on it. He used to snort the shit. For those of you who don't know, he died of a cocaine overdose on an airplane. That's why it's funny. Not
that's fun, but yeah.
People spraying aphids with window cleaner to kill them. I've had people ask me what the acceptable level of radium is in the water. Ask me what the acceptable level of radon is in their water. I've had people ask me if they could use bore water from fracking in their system. I've had people like this craziest questions.
There's that old saying, there are no stupid questions. That saying's not actually true. There are some stupid questions.
I'm not saying any of those people are stupid by any means, but it's just like people don't apply because it's something that's got some kind of mystique to it, or it's a science. People see it almost as like a magical thing, and they think that like normal rules don't apply because it's this magical thing that just works, and they don't understand, but they know that it works, and they see other people that are successful, so they just come up with these whack-a-mamie, cockamamie solutions on stupid shit. And you see it on the forums constantly. You see it on the internet, Facebook, all the time. But it doesn't mean that it's right, you know.
Oh, you hit on it real quick before we leave this or segue to something else. You were just asking about all these liquid things. Now, I always get a kick out of this. Now, I wouldn't do this, but I think I've heard people say, I think I've even heard you say it's possible that you could do this. What about people always asking me about using the water that condensates from their dehumidifier and stuff like that, or and that kind of thing. Now, I don't particularly think that's a good idea, but what's your answer on that?
As a noob, I can answer this. I've tried stuff like that, but I also come out of the world of contracting. There are things that when you're building an air conditioning system or refrigeration system where you can collect this water, they have absolutely no consideration whatsoever for living animals because nothing lives in your air conditioner. Some of the heavy metals, some of the fluxes, there's things in there that make welding happen or brazing happen that you don't want any of this shit anywhere near your fish. So as the noob, I even know that.
Right, but I was basically talking about a drain of a dehumidifier where they
have ones that are coated. I think they talked about it on Quest when they were on. They actually have a coating they spray on their stuff, so it is insulated. I think it's a silicone. I don't remember what the. It's not
something
silicone,
inert. Yeah, something inert.
Something inert that they have that actually will allow you to use it for that. Now, what I would say is that if it's for an aquaponic system, don't use it because a lot of those dehumidifiers are either zinc or copper. And those are
copper kills fish.
Two of the micronutrients that you can kill fish and plants very easily if you have them too high levels. But if I was doing a soil grow and anything that I would consider putting a gray water line on, it would be fine.
Oh, gray water. Okay, so as a comparison, see, I'm just going to continue to tell people it's a bad idea and leave it at that. Well, gray, if you want to consider gray water, that I would.
I used to have a fish tank when I was a kid, and I loved my fish. And I was getting into, before I knew anything, even less than I know now, which is kind of scary. I decided, I don't just want regular gravel in the bottom. So I collected pennies for months.
Did that.
And then I replaced the stuff. I'm like, it's going to be so cool. I'm going to have all these pennies for my gravel in the tank. Isn't it going to be bitching? And I'm watching the fish, and they start swimming around really, really, really fast. And then they went belly up. And then the next one would swim around really, really, really fast and go belly up. Yeah. I now know you don't use pennies for gravel in your fish tank.
Or even
I had to sacrifice a lot of fish for that knowledge. And
copper oxidizes when you put it in a fish tank.
But in sixth grade, I was still just being a kid.
Yeah. That's about when I did it, brother. That's about right. Sixth grade killed my damn fish tank. No doubt about it. I get a kick. The other thing is that I always get asked. Well, Steve's on his little break here. I always get asked about. I'm gonna throw this at Mr. Green Jeans over here since Steve's on over there on a break.
I have to take a bit of a break here too.
Mr. Green Jeans, I'd ask you, can I piss in my plants? Now, we know you can cycle urine, I think. But what do you think about that one? Now we get a little...
No, definitely not.
Only if your mother-in-law is going to eat them.
No, they don't like straight up piss at all. Right. I mean, ironically, I mean, pee is, urea is the source of nitrogen, basically is pee.
It has to convert.
Oh boy, I knew I knew it was going to get rough here. I mean, in theory, this is why people say, you know, ask, you know, can I pee in my plants? Because in theory is correct, but
so what you can do is you can pee into a bottle or something else and ferment it for 2 or more weeks.
Right.
Then you can use it, but you need to dilute it heavily.
Right.
I've actually lived on more than one commune in the middle of nowhere where we did this for nitrogen. We'd actually put it on horse manure in compost and actually use it to supplement nitrogen for horse manure because it's very low in nitrogen and extremely high in phosphorus and potassium. So it's and calcium. So it's much better for fruiting crops, but you do have to supplement nitrogen. So that can be a way to do it. But again, some food safety issues. There's some questions on what medications those people are on. If they're on certain medications, that can definitely make it into the plants and cause health issues later on. So you do need
just
to be
pee on the compost pile.
Or organic humans when you're free range organic humans when you're doing that.
Trees definitely appreciate it. I think a step a little ways out into the woods where there's a couple of nice big trees. They definitely, you know, but because by the time it makes it down to them, you know, the only thing is little plants, you know, or, you know, obviously a plant in a container, forget that.
No, so it's like beer piss. If you've had like 5 or 6 beers, yeah, it's just alcohol.
Oh, maybe. Hey, there you go. Really,
that would be totally fine. You're not going to burn your plants. You're not going to do nothing.
That's a good point.
I know none of my old clients are listening to this. I used to do contracting, and I had some very expensive clients who were multi-millionaires. And one of the things they wanted was they had bought this mirror, but they wanted the frame around it, which is metal, and copper and stuff. They wanted a good patina on it. So I bought the crew couple cases of beer, and what we would do is, you know, we're working on one job, and every time everybody had to go pee, we had them go out back of this one job, which was not a job where the clients were on property, and we'd pee on this frame for this mirror, and we did that for about almost a week, 10 days or so, and then we hosed it down and charged exorbitant money for this custom patinaed frame that these clients had brought back from Europe. And they're like, how did you accomplish this? I go, oh, chemistry. But yeah, there were things we've all done on our past lives that this is not live, is it? Okay. Just
yeah.
Great stuff.
But you know that frame you just bought at auction for $10,000? They peed on it.
Yeah, that's what we did. Well, with that, gentlemen, I actually have to skedaddle. I wasn't going to be here today. I thought we had an opportunity to grill our hosts, and so I had to stick around. But I'm going to need to beg off here.
Thanks. And then do you want to tell people how to find you or any information? Is there a place they can, an email or something they can send if they're interested in the creams or topicals or anything?
Yes, I'm always available on oldfartgrows@gmail.com. I am threatening, will actually be getting some content put up. I've just been knee deep in research and working on some project stuff. I've not given any attention to my Old Fart Grows YouTube channel. But yes, if people have questions, you know, specifically around how to get the best use out of their medicine if they're in a state that's not, you know, legal and they just got a certain amount of flour and they want to do the infusion, I'm happy to share a tech that I use for me. And you're looking at it going on 2 years, an opiate-free guy who has 7 missing discs in his spine. My discs have not grown back, but I don't need the opiates anymore. And you know, people out there having those kinds of issues, that's part of my passion that I like to share. We now have a 50 statable cream that I've taken some of my bioavailable CBD and incorporated it into a cream that is meant to be delivered through your body. Don't eat this stuff. That would be wrong. But if you want to rub it on your belly or your knee or your whatever, we're going to have this stuff coming out very, very soon. Roger, I know, is actually going to be running a contest or some sort of thing over on I Love Growing Marijuana to get some of these out to some contestant winners. I'm actually going to be shipping that to him in the next day or so. And pretty soon we'll have some announcements where we'll be able to we're actually going to open it up to the community, where if you want to get some stuff in and get it to some of your friends and stuff, we'll throw a few bucks your way. That's still kind of being worked out, but this has been getting rave reviews. My mom loves me even more. Oh my gosh, at 80 years old, fixing her dry skin. My girlfriend, I can't make her go away. I don't know if she loves me or she loves the creams. I think she kind of a little of both. But yes, you can always get a hold of me at Old Fart Grows, and I was really glad to be here and put Marty and Steve in the hot seat today. Hopefully I was as cool as Steve is running a lot of the interviews. But yeah, I love this hangout. Really, really glad to be here with everybody.
Is there menthol in that cream? If you get a little extra frisky, is that going to be an issue, or is that the...
No, in this cream is not menthol. This is the frankincense, lavender, and tea tree oil. But in the pain balm, unfortunately, I can't send the pain balm to 50 states because it has THC. Even though it's non-psychoactivated THC, it still has it in it. I'm still limited to where that can be distributed even within the state I'm in. But let's keep up with the political stuff. I know Steve sometimes has run whole shows on the political thing. Let's get this plant legalized for everybody. It has too much to offer, and when you do that, I'll be able to send you the pain cream too, which honestly is banging. It really, really works. It's got oils designed to get into your body. I wish I just, from so much relief I've had being off opiates and stuff, it just makes me want to punch a wall or something, or kick a puppy, because I can't send it to people in other states who are not trying to be stupid or irresponsible. They're just hurting like I've been hurting, and it breaks my heart that I can't do that. So let's keep up the good fight, and or at some point our company will wind up setting up shop in your state so that we can make it within your state and get it to you. That's the overall.
And we're getting very close. We have to actually finally being fully licensed here in multiple markets. I'll leave it at that.
That's great.
So I'll jinx myself.
Mm-hmm. Night, gentlemen.
Cheers. Thanks.
Hi, Tommy.
Okay.
So did you guys, Roger, Green Jeans, have any other questions before we switch gears?
Shoot, I don't, I wasn't, I actually wasn't really prepared, and I don't know why, but I had a real busy afternoon, and I had thought of that thing about asking Marty about the labs to clarify the serum, or, using the whole juice together. And
I can clarify that a little bit. So if you're doing it, you can actually they make a tap for like brewing that you can slip down.
Yeah.
In fact, no,
they make some interesting things for doing labs.
I have a tap, and you slip it through, and it's actually for pulling out that whey. You don't want to pull the cheese off. Now, there's a cheese layer that you get on top of it when you make labs. You can take that and put it on your soil garden. Or you can even take that and have it as kefir and blend it and drink it. Like you can eat that. Like there's nothing wrong with that. It's 100% edible. Give it to your chickens, give it to your goats, or drink it yourself. It's a good probiotic. I've drank in my own. That's the one thing I like about a lot of the KNF stuff is you can drink most of it. You can't say that for most other nutrients that work even a tenth as good as they do. That's why I love all the work that Chris Trump has done. There's a gentleman on YouTube named Drake. He has a lot of the full extras, in the full KNF 1, KNF 2, KNF 3 lectures on YouTube that are available for everyone if they're looking to get more into it. it's a great thing to hybridize with aquaponics, and I think that's kind of the future of aquaponics, is nailing down what a lot of these different microbe chains are, like Mammoth P, introducing Mammoth P, for example. They've been on the show. It really helps maximize the availability of phosphorus from the fish waste. So even if you're just doing regular aquaponics, you will get more bioavailable phosphorus by adding the microbes in Mammoth P into your system, because those microbe chains will increase it. The same thing with Korea natural farming, adding those microbe chains. But I do think that we need to find a way, you know how, and this is something that I haven't even talked about at all yet. So you guys are familiar with like IMO, like
indigenous microorganisms,
and how they culture them in the boxes and everything with the wet rice and everything like that. We need to figure out an equivalent for aquatic microbial harvesting. So maybe like for saltwater sponges, or some kind of other way that we can use to colonize. And that so far, that's something that I've been working on ever since I had a chance to go meet and talk to Chris Trump and understand his methodology. I've been trying to figure out how to adapt that to aquatic microbiomes. And so far, the saltwater sponges has been the best way I've been to. And let me explain to you why this is important, because it kind of sounds like, oh, you're just trying to copy whatever. Let me explain to you why this would help in, say, a commercial application. So say I'm in Colorado, or even if I'm here in Half Moon Bay, okay, so Ouroboros Farms. Okay, so their water is in 54, 55 to 68 degree water year round. That's lower than most nitrifying bacteria would normally operate maximum, at a maximum rate. But if I was able to go to, say, the Lake Estes up in Estes Park, or the lake above, I can't remember the name of it, above Boulder, up the high altitude, super cold snow melt water, or even ones here in California up in Shasta. Okay, I went up to a snow melt lake and gather really cold water microbes from their system, or from that lake, and introduce them into my system. Now I'm going to have microbe chains that are adapted to that cold water and going to mineralize nutrients at a much colder temperature, particularly when we're trying to diversify fish species. Makes a huge difference. And as we learned thanks to the NASA study last year, there isn't one microbe chain that works. There's hundreds of different microbe chains in an aquatic environment that will all function to break down phosphorus, potassium, iron. And that's what the NASA proved. They did a whole study over 50 different farms of aquaponics, and I forget how many of aquaculture, and they found that none of them had similar microbiomes as far as their aquatic food chains, as far as the microbes. And a lot of people think like nitrogen, for example, and nitrospirit and nitrosoma. Well, they've actually found microbes that do straight ammonia to nitrate, that skip nitrite entirely and do it internally. And that's something that's often preached, but it's actually not really correct. It's a minor part of the food chain, and you don't even know if that's the one going on in your system. That is one of the chains that works, but there's many different ones. And that's what I think is kind of the rabbit hole in organic hydroponics and aquaponics to a lesser extent, is that discovering all these different microbe chains that function, and then eventually, probably 50 or 100 years from now, mixing and matching those to discover the ultimate aquatic biome, fastest producing, thing, and then hybridizing that with terrestrial microbiome, which is with a dual root zone, to get the maximum possible plant production that you could ever possibly get, having unlimited water supply, maximum nutrient mineralization on both the aquatic layer and the aquatic food web and the terrestrial food web, and really crank. That's kind of what, when we get the rest of this company on, that's what I'm going to spend the rest of my life researching, is just, and that's what I'd like to do anyway, if I get my way, is just cranking on that and trying to figure out what these chains are and what the different microbes are. Because, once you have that figured out, you can go to any planet in the universe and bring those with you. And now, boom, you have water, you melt some ice, and now we're good to go. You know what I mean? Like, we're off to the races. Now we can produce food for anybody with, we bring our fish, we bring our seeds, and we're good to go. And that's all we need. We can melt the ice when we get there, and now we're rocking. Like that's kind of the you know, if I could put out a bunch of knowledge and education and all that kind of stuff, and help take a lot of this mysticism and the craziness from aquaponics, and you know, it's so complicated. Well, no, here's the answer, here's the chart, here's the dosage, here's your target, here's your testing, this is what you use to test it, this is what your target should be, you know, and just make it stupid simple. And that's what I'm trying to do with the book I'm working on. Is just here's everything you need to know, you know, if you're getting started. Here's all your dosages so you can fix your nutrients. Here's your targets. Because a lot of people get so stuck up, like you were talking earlier about the religion, they're so focused on solely getting all their nutrients from fish waste, or solely getting it through mineralization, or solely getting it through MMBERs, moving media bed reactors, or solely getting it through whatever technology. And it's like, actually, it's none of those. It's a hybridization of how to get 5% here, 25% here, 50% there, and stacking it. That's what's going to get us to something that makes sense with very minimal inputs, not trying to just go off in one direction. And that's something I think that's kind of frustrates the hell out of me, especially when I get a chance to talk to a lot of aquaponic producers, is they're so ingrained in their one little view of aquaponics that they can't kind of see around that. Sorry, I was kind of a rant.
No, that was a good one too. I like what you said about the. Oh, I'll go ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, you know, yeah, starting off saying the religion of organic gardening and stuff, you know, with the part, you know, it's just the thing of starting out with a point of view and trying to fit things into a preconceived point of, you know, view that you have, like you said, wanting to have it all be, you know, all of your nutrients come from your fish and whatnot. It's just because you have some kind of requirements to begin with, and those are generally going to hold you back anyways, you know. So somebody, religious or not. Sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
Somebody in chat asked about the Aqua IMO. I actually started that when I worked at the Aquaponic Source. My first idea for that was way back then. So we actually we had beneficial nematodes and a whole bunch of beneficial microbes, bacteria, and other things from our super old aquaponic systems that we had, and we put the sponges in a rack inside the what's it called, particle filter, in order to separate everything out. And that was where it was teeming with microbes. So we were able to get really good colonization of both the nematodes that would flow through the media beds, and then they cling onto those because it was right through the water stream when it would go into the solid separator. And it would collect them before they'd make it off to the bottom, or at least a large percentage of them, along with it. And we didn't need enough current to not leave a lot of fish waste on it. So we'd have these beautiful little sponges that were teeming with life. And I've even had if you go to the Aquaponic Sources YouTube page, there's even a video I did with a microscope on there. But we were able to kind of culture those, and that was kind of the first work. And then when I met Chris Trump and you know, was like, oh my God, we need to do this for aquatic biomes and not just for terrestrial, because this is a brilliant idea. And this is, you know, we could absolutely apply this technology to aquatic food webs, and we need to.
And it's so easy with the dual root zone. That's how it can be applied. You know, you can go right into that. That's where you mentioned KNF earlier and stuff like that, and how that kind of technology or science can be applied to the aquaponics now. And a lot of it's by the use of that dual root zone. You know, that opened up a whole new avenue. You know, that's where it really got me intrigued. You know. I honestly don't think I ever would have tried aquaponics or wanted to build or, change my farm around because of just the original aquaponics, despite people having some success with it. But the dual root zone intrigued me, and now I could see how you could provide so much more and get so much more out of it. And it'd be such a quality, high level of food and organic. That's what really struck me. I do look at it as real, awesome. I mean, that's really organic. I don't know how to.
That's kind of the cornerstone to anytime you're doing high production aquaponics is the dual root zone. You're taking advantage of the benefits that those mycorrhizal fungi and those terrestrial rotifers and terrestrial amoebas and terrestrial bacteria provide, and then hybridizing that with the aquatic food web, the same way that they have the soil food web. They have the aquatic food web that will equally break things down in some places, in a lot of cases, a lot faster and better and more efficiently. Nitrogen, for example, is processed extremely fast in an aquatic environment, much faster than terrestrial. So, and that's just one example, but this is the thing that needs more research: is what is better with calcium. Is calcium better through the terrestrial or through the aquatic, or is iron better through the terrestrial or the aquatic? And that's kind of the science that it needs to be broken down and spliced and chopped up and studied heavily. And then what microbes are key, is the absence or presence of a certain microbe or microbe chain have a significant effect on growth. And that's a whole new, entire field that didn't exist, 10, 15 years ago.
And then you can't add all the ferments that you can make into the fish tank. You have some of the ferments would only be added.
Yeah, and then that's a whole other thing. So
yeah,
you have some of the other work that I'm working on right now where we have specific microbes that are isolating certain plant proteins or enzymes or this, that, or the other plant compounds to help with growth or help with immune system response or insect resistance or growth speed or hormone response or XYZ. That's a whole other separate rabbit hole that you could go down that's just as big as the microbe one, if not bigger. And so this is all those two fields, I think, are in particular are kind of the future of aquaponics, the future of the field, and the future of both indoor and greenhouse plant production, as well as aquaponic and organic hydro production in general.
Because food is getting more and more scarce as more people are born, and society grows and grows and kills off things because of the industrial complex.
The price of chemical. As the price of water goes up, aquaponics becomes more lucrative.
Yeah, not to mention food. I mean, food's already so expensive that it's it's incredibly high. I mean, I'd hate to have to feed a family of 5 or 6 right now, with the cost of food, and but I think I just look at it as a way, because once you have your systems dialed in, barring any kind of catastrophe, you really. And if you're doing the K&F method, we already know from Chris's stories about rebuilding a farm, and after 3 years, all they had to do was water it. They no longer had to put any minerals in the farm at all. They had to maintenance their systems, and they had to add water. So that's in that case, you did need water, but aquaponics, because you got a closed system that retains its water. You got to top it off, but it's not like just dumping thousands and thousands of gallons on a drip to waste system of hydroponics, where if you got a water shortage and you're running, I know in my 30 by 48, and I probably didn't water as heavy as a lot of guys did with a lot of extra. I didn't believe in all the extra runoff that they do, some of them. And, and I would run 300 gallons out, in a little bit less than 2 days. Just about 2 days. I could get 2 days sometimes, and other times I always had the parts to make it to build my own mixing deal, but I always mix my nutrients fresh. When I was doing hydroponics, I mixed them fresh every time I needed to. And I'm just talking about the water that you just spray to waste or drip to waste. Ebb and flow system, not as bad. You're not going to waste the water, but again, we're going to get to the point where even the minerals, the salts that people are using aren't going to be available. That's something we don't really talk about because we don't want to talk about salts a lot with the aquaponic culture. But
you could bring up the phosphorus crunch. We're going to run out of phosphorus in the next 30 years if we don't do something. Like, people don't realize that, like, commercial food production as we know it will stop to exist in our current lifetimes if we don't do something immediately. And it's just stupid that no one's talking about this shit.
And in some of the other ways, there's companies like Israel and China that are trying to corner the market and buy up all the salts. Because some of just like phosphate, like Steve said, if the source is not going to be there anymore. The same as with peat moss. There's a very good chance that at some point, they're just tearing it all up and everybody's using it. And I'm guilty too. I use it too. But that's another thing that's I've read about shortages, so it must be out there to some extent.
Does phosphorus have to be done with rock? I mean, like bone meal won't do the job or whatever. I mean, for all these crops, nowhere near enough. Can't do it. Doesn't have enough phosphorus.
There's a bunch of sources of it. So you have, there's fossilized seabird guano. Again, there's only so much of that left on the planet. They also use that for explosives. So you're competing directly with like for those of you that don't know, all seabird deposits of seabird waste in the United States or any U.S. territory is owned by the U.S. U.S. military, and you can face like serious fucking fines if you go shovel it and try to collect your own. It's like serious, like you're in military trouble, not like normal police or government. Like you're in deep shit because it's all for explosive
security trouble.
Yeah, in case of we go to war again or something. So.
Interesting point. So therein lies some of the shortages. There you got government.
So the issue with seabird guano is it's high in sodium, and then you have rock phosphate. Again, there's only finite amounts of rock phosphate left. The nice thing about aquaponics, if you have aquaponics in the right biome or the right microbiome, add a little mammoth pea and some stuff to it, you'll get almost all the phosphorus. Not all, but the majority of the phosphorus that you need. You need just a little bit of supplementation to keep it dialed in.
Well, are companies like Mammoth Pea going to suffer at some point?
No, because they can spray their stuff onto a field that doesn't have enough phosphorus, and it'll make phosphorus available again. So there's already a ton of. So if you have a field crop, like a field that's been worked with synthetic stuff, there's tons of phosphorus that's in a non-bioavailable form to the plants in that soil already. The microbe would go through and churn that up and basically make it plant available, so you wouldn't need to add more. But if you have an excessive amount already on the soil, it's just in a non-plant available form, then you'd be fine because it's going to make a lot of that available. See what I'm saying? So you already have a food for it and a base for it to work on. It works especially well on old worked fields, like shittier, older long-term worked fields. It works really good at because of that particular thing. There's a lot for it to work with.
Now, does that continue to establish?
As long as
in this field so that it doesn't deplete immediately, or what's the deal with that?
It will for a while. You will have to, you should always reapply microbes occasionally or regularly to maintain population levels, especially if you want maximum plant growth. The same way you would, nutrients, but it's not very, you can propagate a lot of this stuff from as long as you get some of the source each time. It just depends on what you're doing. It's a very vague answer, I guess.
Well, another thing we were talking about, Marty was talking about it. He said, now all your fruits are really more potassium than phosphate, but then you had beets. So, and I said, well, then grow beets, or what other vegetables aside from beets that of would be a source of where you could ferment your own potassium? I mean, your own phosphate, I'm sorry. Phosphate.
Well, there is no other crops you grow to add phosphate. There's no crops at all you grow to add phosphate.
Oh, okay. I thought he said that if you
root crops in particular need high phosphate, yes.
Right.
But that's just particular to root crops.
Okay, I must have missed out what he said. He was talking about how all the grapes and the blackberries and all were really more high in potassium and they lacked the proper amount of phosphorus. And he said, but I can use beets to make a ferment, and then I will get
fermented beet greens are high in phosphorus, yes.
Oh, beet greens?
Greens, yes. So you cut the greens off and ferment those and do a FPJ, make a fermented plant juice out of those.
That's what I was talking about.
Yep. So that would be how you would apply that.
Is there any other plants that you could do the same thing with, or the greens of any other plants? Or is it just
phosphorus in particular? I don't know the answer to that question.
Probably Swiss chard, probably. It's the same thing, right?
I would imagine chards would be similar. You could take your older, more waxy, leathery chard leaves and do that with it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Swiss chard grows a long time and the roots really deep.
Oh,
So
oh yeah,
maybe
I've seen 4-year-old chard plants before.
you can have a 4-year-old chard, got nice deep roots,
It'll
starts
have
to
like
taste really good.
It'll have like a 2 or 3 foot tall stalk on it, and it'll have a root on it. You know, it'll all be root. You know, they're basically a beet. So a lot of people don't know Swiss chard is a beet actually, and you're eating beet greens. That's why the roots, for example, if you ever do them in a DWC, the roots are actually the same color as the stalk. So if the stalk is yellow and the veins are yellow on the plant, the roots are yellow or orange or red or whatever variety it is.
Cool. Beets can't be beat.
Any other questions? And then we'll ask you guys what you're up to, and then we'll close up the show.
Yeah, I think we've had a pretty good show and got to ask you guys a bunch of questions, and our listeners will be able to refer to this episode. I'm glad you decided to do 101 because, like I said, in college it'd be like class 101. We're going to go over a lot of basic stuff, but we got a little bit beyond basic too. We might have got to 201 area or 301 area tonight sometimes. But
I think I might resurrect. We used to have in the beginning of the show we had like a nutrient section. It was like, can I use this? I think was the name of it. And I think we might try to resurrect that section because
that'd be cool.
We get a lot of questions like that again. At least I've been getting a lot of them lately. And we just went through like people would basically it was up to the listeners to send me products, and you'd send me an email with the product. Send an email to Ponics, POTENT PONICS @gmail.com, Ponics. Send me a question if you have a question about a product. The biggest thing I would say is avoid yucca extract and zinc sulfate. Those two tend to be ones that zinc sulfate you can add safely, but if you overdose, you'll nuke your fish. And yucca extract will kill your fish no matter the dosage. And it's organic. I mean, it's used all the time in soil gardening, but it will nuke your fish immediately. That's probably the biggest one that I've seen people kill their fish constantly. At least once a month, someone kills their fish with yucca, and I get an email about it. At least.
Yeah, I think Ken, our use kind of segment would be awesome because of the panel too. Because I mean, Josh could have answers, Mr. Green, everybody could have answers too. And I mean, you most likely you got if somebody else knows it. One panelist knows it. You usually know it, Steve, in general. So, but the thing is that they bring up suggestions that allow you to go off on a tangent, you know,
yep.
About, you know, and that's when we all learn more.
Well, you know, it's funny. So we had a class recently I was teaching, and nobody there was like shovel ready to start their farm or whatever. And it was weird because I'm so used to having every class, like someone's like in the middle of starting a business, or they have a business they're already running and they got problems, or, you know, they have stuff going on that they need solutions to. And it makes a lot of really good content for teaching to other students and things like that.
Well, they kind of know about growing, so they know
exactly.
the question.
They're pulling out weird questions or getting you on topics that you normally might not get on the topic of if you're just going through the motions. And this was the first class and probably a dozen classes where I didn't have somebody in the class like that. And it just happened to be the makeup of the class. Everyone was just kind of a newbie getting to learn it. You know, summer and everyone's on vacation or whatever. And it was kind of weird because there wasn't that, you know, extra kind of data pull, I guess, for lack of better terminology.
Cool.
I was thinking of something else, so I couldn't help you there. Sorry. I usually.
Oh, actually, a quick note. So, any of you guys on the West Coast, we're going to be doing a workshop with Dr. James Mercosi, the grandfather of aquaponics at Ouroboros Farms. We will be announcing the dates here. They will be near the end of October, early November. Yeah, he's normally in Thailand. He lives in Thailand, I guess now. But will be in the United States for a few weeks, and we're going to have him at the farm. So if you guys have ever wanted to meet one of the people that actually helped found aquaponics 35 years ago at University of Virgin Islands, I think he was doing this in the late 70s, if memory serves me right. So he's been on the show as well. You're welcome to go back and check out the episode. But he's one of the guys that, you know, just figured out the UVI model from scratch, and, you know, one of the great, philosophers in aquaponics, and it comes to that, and people that just have really done a lot of the digging and the scientific work, like not the religion, not the preaching, not the bullshit, the actual science. He's one of the people that actually can stand there and give you numbers and cite white papers. There's no one on earth, I think, that has more white papers than him on aquaponics. So,
well, you're going to have to try to get him on the show that week.
Well, yeah, well, I'll see if I can get him on the show beforehand. But but he's been on the show once already, and he was a blast. So we'll be doing a workshop with him sometime, and then I know Josh has got a set of dates they're working on for the next Science of Regenerative Organic Cannabis Conference. We will also be working on dates for some aquaponic specific classes with some of the speakers. I don't know if we're going to do a whole multi-day event like we did. We'll probably do a couple of broken out weekends. So maybe like a weekend with Suzanne Wainwright and a weekend with maybe an extended weekend with Elaine Ingham, or you know what I mean, kind of break that up a little bit, or a weekend with Chris Trump rather than putting them all together, just because scheduling wise it gets pretty tricky, and we already have I think 4 or 5 events that we're trying to nail down for weekends already. So I think it'll work a little bit better scheduling wise to break them up. And plus, a lot of people don't want to necessarily come for the whole, they don't want to pay, a huge amount. They'd rather pay a smaller amount for a specific speaker. And I think it makes it more accessible for you guys, and makes it, we're basically just trying to break even or break even plus enough to like just cover what we normally make during that time. So we're not out to make $1 million or anything like that. We're not trying to bilk you guys. We're just trying to be able to put these educational seminars on and not go bankrupt doing it, at least as far as the funding for the project. So I just want you guys to be aware that sometimes they are not the cheapest thing in the world, but understand it can be expensive sometimes to throw some of these events. And a lot of people forget that. Sometimes they look at some of the prices of some of the classes or workshops, and it's like, hey guys, this is a lot of time and effort, and 2 or 3 days of someone's life on, when they out of their normal job, and along with other expenses and everything else that comes along with it can add up. So understand that is part of the reason why a lot of these different seminars are the price that they are. A lot of people don't understand that. As someone that puts them on, we don't make a ton of money on these. They are more for spreading the word and educating people and really getting them excited about it and getting the training they need, so that, if they do go on to start their own farm, then we can work on them, individually and help them out. But, this gives you a real good foundation and gives you everything you need. So especially for educators and things like that, it can be a great option. So you can definitely go to ouroborosfarms.com and check out the wide range of classes and seminars and things like that on there as well. We're going to be working on a video series in an online section here before the end of the year as well, filmed at the farm.
Yeah, Ken's great too. Ken was great last week on the show. The week whenever
Ken's
last
awesome.
show. Yeah.
Ken's a really awesome guy and does a lot of work for promoting the farm. I know he was just teaching last weekend the aquaponics. Well, we didn't advertise it on the show, but if you're ever interested, we do have an aquaponics 101 and basically a 102 class in out of Ouroboros Farms, the first weekend of every month, and we get around 30 people every time. It's pretty impressive, and it's a lot of fun. You see people so motivated to get into it, and really helps keep you on motivated to come back every week and really get involved. And it's nice to see that passion in people, especially sometimes when you're struggling with cannabis licensing, and we've been working on our cannabis licenses February of last year, to give you the level of frustration that I'm at right now. But I think the light is at the end of the tunnel here finally. But it can be very frustrating when you deal with the same kind of crap over and over, and to see people come in and just be amazed, and to see their faces light up, or their kids light up when they feed the koi or they feed the trout and the whole tank explodes like they're piranhas. Like, it just makes it all worth it again, and it's wonderful. And I'll be honest with you, I still get the same amount of joy out of feeding the big fish tanks and watching the fish just explode as I did when I was 5 years old. It still puts that same goofy fucking smirk on my face.
That's cool. That's cool to watch. I watched the first time I was researching like growing fish or tilapia and stuff like that. There was somewhere over in Vietnam or somewhere, and basically it looked like they had 16-foot pools like you buy in your backyard, and she come by with a big old giant thing of food and just go like that across the thing, like you said, it looked like in the movies like the piranha, like the piranha were eating the guy in the James Bond movie or something.
Yep. All right. Well, I promise next week I'll have some. We'll go back to normal guests. I thought we'd have a little fun. I love the idea that Roger had of doing an interview with me, and I think it was Roger and Mr. Green Jeans, or I don't remember who it was first. But, had the idea of doing an interview with just me and Marty, and I thought that was kind of a good idea. It was because everyone else did start off as a guest originally. So
my idea was to do it at 101 because of the tie to college, the way college has class 101 class.
Well.
Ouroboros 101.
We never did an episode 7. We do have a lost episode, and I have a particular guest that I want to bring on for that episode. And when he joins us, he will be on episode number 7. So
cool.
When you see it, they will know it's a particular guest. But
now, that's going to fit into the first
show that we've been on for a long time, that has been talking to us since episode 30. And trying to come on the show. So we will get him on. Some of you have probably figured out who it is. Some of you have not. But we do have a very important guest that will hopefully be joining us for that one. But that's what we're saving that for.
Is that going to fit right into your first 15 episodes where you're teaching it? Is that one of the reasons? Or just because you want it to be cool on, Yeah, it's going to fit into that era of the show?
Yep.
Cool.
Yep. So the other person, hopefully we'll have Nick Savadov on before too long. I've been talking to him. I have a couple of other weed guests I've been recommended by people. A couple of authors I've had a chance to talk to recently that I want to get on the show. But I would be honest with you, I've been so buried in this legal paperwork and stupid bullshit for the fucking licensing stuff that I have not had time to really go out the way I did. But I did met some cool people on the line. I want to bring a lawyer on or two, and I want to bring on
that'd be cool.
Some people that are more involved in the financial end of the industry, to try and help give people an idea of what goes on when people are trying to, on the financial end of cannabis industry, and people trying to move to the stock market and some of the other weirder ends of the cannabis industry. I think could make some really good content. I know. I'll be honest with you. I think 2 of our best episodes were Matt from Mountainside Glass, and then Jeremy from the packaging. Doing the packaging stuff.
Yeah.
Totally kind of off the wall topics, like not normally like cannabis heavy, but ended up being really interesting and technically, articulate episodes that I think would, again, I want to get some of the legalese on here. I'd love to have someone go over what the current legal landscape is from a lawyer point of view. And there's some other cool ideas that we've been kicking around for the show to try and help it move forward. And I'm looking at possibly launching a website around the show finally. We made it to 100 episodes. I think maybe we need to take it a little more seriously than we have been. I know the Dude Grow show really kind of did a big shift change around episode 100. And I've definitely learned a lot from Scotty and how he's grown his community. And I think we can do similar strides. And just, if anyone has any suggestions on how to grow our community, please shoot me an email over at Potent Ponics. I'm happy to listen. And if you're interested in being involved, I'd love to keep growing the Aquaponic Cannabis community. We have Aquaponic Cannabis growers on Facebook. We have Aquachronic on Reddit. So if you guys are interested in helping us grow, I'd love to have you involved. And if you guys have suggestions on how we can improve, please let me know. How do people find you there, Roger? What have you been up to lately before we tie things up?
Same old. I'm out here doing things around the farm, trying to keep up. And you can catch me at ilovegrowingmarijuana.com. And I'm in a little pain, so I'm going to probably take some of the CBD oil from the website here in a few minutes. And it's a 5%. It's very nice. I love that. That's the thing I love about the CBD and what's going on with the cream and all, is that I'm seeing I'm seeing parents of us trying this stuff out, I know Hogmaster was here earlier, and he got it originally for his parents, but he also learned how to make coconut oil, infused coconut oil at the same time. So, of course, his parents aren't big on the THC content and getting all kind of, buzzed out. But my father tried it. I got a bottle from my father, and you know what? I forgot to ask him, but I'll see him tomorrow. We go grocery shopping tomorrow. Something I'm very lucky. I have an 85-year-old father and an 80-year-old mother, or 81-year-old mother. I hope I'm right. She'll get mad at me if I said she's too old. But I think she actually admits she's old now, though, so I might be off the hook. But we get to go shopping tomorrow. I have to ask him because I haven't asked him, but he's kind of funny. He asked me about it, so I got him some. Now I'd be willing to bet you when I ask him tomorrow he hadn't tried it. But either way, I can't wait to to get some samples of that cream, because I do know I already have some people lined up. I think that's going to go great. I just wish I apologize that I can't get you any guests, because everybody I know, because I'm in a less than legal area, I can't. There's nobody going to really come on and talk about or want to come on a cannabis show if they have a business area.
You got to get your Amsterdam friends on.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. That was my other thing. Or they're in freaking Europe, or Australia or New Zealand, which I'd really got a friend.
We can always do a film. We can always do a filmed interview, but that's okay. We'll talk about that offline.
Yeah, but I just wanted to say, you brought up getting guests, and I'd like to do that. Well, I'm giving a shout out if anybody's listening over there at some point. Maybe they'll say, well, I heard you say you couldn't get any of us on, so maybe somebody will say, hey, I'd like to get on the show. Anyway. All right, I'll pass it on to you, Steve, if you want to sign off. We had a nice show, and it's nice that we're going to get off a little early tonight, so that's cool.
Early? It's 9:30. We're late.
Is it? Wow, time flies when you're having fun, I guess.
Yeah, we're half an hour later than the show normally ends.
No, I haven't been on hardly any shows.
Watching still, I love you all. Yeah. Again, I'm super appreciative for all of you amazing people that help us get to episode 100, 101. I know there was definitely days where Marty and I considered not continuing the show, and seeing you guys post week in and week out has really helped us stick to it. And now it's what I do on Thursdays. I don't do anything else. If somebody says, hey, can we get together? No, I can't get together on Thursdays. I have my thing and my podcast every Thursday. It's what we do. So
right.
All the rest of you that join us, and everyone else, and those of you that join us through the recordings and listen to us later on, I love you all and appreciate what you do, and catch you guys next week. Cheers.